Chapter 128. Girl, don't tell me you want to attack the height of the black-clothed man's space. This was a world that he had created himself. Once he died, this space would collapse along with him. I advise you not to attack the black-clothed man. Otherwise, even a mystic moon sect won't be able to protect you. Hearing this, Yu Mengqing thought of the black-clothed man's terrifying aura and couldn't help but shiver. She snorted coldly and glanced at Murong-Yu before saying, "Don't worry, I won't reveal anything about the black-clothed man." In the following time, the two of them chatted as they flew forward. A few days later, they entered a city in the cultivation world. It couldn't be compared to Upper Azure City, but it was about the same size as ancient Spring City. On the main street, Yu Mengqing and a person covered in a black robe slowly walked forward. Everywhere they passed, everyone who saw them stopped and looked back. The combination of the two of them was too strange. A beautiful and refined young girl and a black-clothed person. It was unknown if they were male or female. The most important thing was that the black-clothed person emitted a faint fragrance. It refreshed the heart and made people feel relaxed and happy. Anyone who smelled this fragrance couldn't help but take a deep breath. Then, they looked at Murong-Yu with an infatuated expression, guessing if Murong-Yu was a peerless beauty. With the black robe, it was obvious that he didn't want others to see his real body. Of course, people couldn't tell if Murong-Yu was a man or a woman. The most important thing was that the faint fragrance emitted from his body made people mistakenly think that he was a woman. There were only two situations when a woman wore a black robe. One was that she was so ugly that she couldn't be seen. The other was that she was a peerless beauty. Naturally, Murong-Yu was mistaken for a peerless beauty by countless cultivators. Not long after, many male cultivators followed behind Yu Mengqing and the black-clothed man. Among these people, there were some perverted people who constantly breathed in the fragrance emitted from Murong-Yu's body. Don't you think this black-clothed man is a great beauty? Otherwise, why would he be wearing a black robe? Maybe she's an ugly woman. Idiot! Does an ugly girl have such a nice smell? Also, do you see the beauty beside her? As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. There will never be an ugly girl around a beautiful woman. Each and every one of them breathed in the fragrance emanating from Murong-Yu's body. They were constantly trying to guess the identity of Murong-Yu. The only thing they didn't do was to lift the black robe on Murong-Yu's body to see what was going on. Murong-Yu, who was shrouded in the black robe, felt a chill run down his spine. He was a very normal man and had no other hobbies. It was one thing for people to guess that he was a woman, but the most important thing was that those people kept breathing in the fragrance that he was emitting. If it were any other normal man, the smell coming from his body would make anyone of the same sex feel extremely disgusted. These bastards. Murong-Yu was so disgusted that he was about to go berserk. Is this feeling okay? Yu Mengqing, who was beside him, was secretly laughing. Let's get out of here quickly. Murong-Yu's face was gloomy as he quickened his pace. At this time, more and more people were following behind. They were all attracted by Murong-Yu's identity and the fragrance on his body. To the Bada Chamber of Commerce. Murong-Yu and Yu Mengqing walked quickly and entered the Bada Chamber of Commerce in no time. Among the people who followed Murong-Yu, many of them also rushed into the Bada Chamber of Commerce. "I'm looking for your supervisor." Murong-Yu directly grabbed a staff member and said. The staff member of the Bada Chamber of Commerce was not weak. Seeing that someone dared to be so presumptuous in the Chamber of Commerce, he couldn't help but sneer. Just as he was about to take action, a purple light shone in his eyes. Bada-ling. Seeing the Bada-ling, the staff member was immediately shocked, speechless. He just looked at the black-robed man who was emitting a faint fragrance. Murong-Yu's voice was gloomy. "I'm sorry, please follow me." The staff member was awakened and immediately looked deeply at Murong-Yu. Unfortunately, he couldn't see Murong-Yu's face. Then, he led Murong-Yu to the back of the Chamber of Commerce. Seeing Murong-Yu and Yu Mengqing walking to the back of the Bada Chamber of Commerce, the people who followed were even more surprised by Murong-Yu's identity. Unfortunately, this was the last time they saw Murong-Yu in a black robe. "Wait for me here." After entering the back of the chamber, Muronyu said to Yu Mengqing in a deep voice. Then, he followed the staff member into one of the rooms. Yu Mengqing snorted coldly, somewhat dissatisfied with Murongyu's behavior. However, she didn't follow him in. Murongyu's intention was obvious. He didn't want her to see what he was doing. Moreover, what made Yu Mengqing curious was why the staff member of the Bada Chamber of Commerce was so respectful to him. Could it be that this guy was related to the Bada Chamber of Commerce? If this guy was really related to the 8 Chambers of Commerce, then his relationship with the black-robed man wasn't bad. Then, this guy's background was too shocking. In the room, when Muronyu showed his Bada token, the supervisor of the Bada Chamber of Commerce, Wu Baiqiu, was shocked. In the entire cultivation world, there were definitely less than 10 Bada tokens, and this young man in front of him was holding a real Bada token. Although they hadn't seen a real Bada token, they all knew what it looked like. He didn't doubt the authenticity of Murongyu's Bada token. Even if Murongyu's Bada token was fake, the Bada Chamber of Commerce would make him spit out 10 times or even 100 times what he got from the Bada Chamber of Commerce today. Looking at the young man in front of him, Wu Baiqiu was very excited. With the Bada token, this person was definitely a distinguished guest. His identity was much more noble than the supervisor of a small chamber of commerce. Therefore, when he saw Murongyu holding the Bada token, Wu Baiqiu immediately became very enthusiastic. As long as he had a good relationship with this distinguished guest, Murongyu only needed to put in a few good words in front of the higher-ups of the Bada Chamber of Commerce. Then, Wu Baiqiu would have a meteoric rise. Wu Baiqiu's reaction was within Murongyu's expectations, but he just smiled and didn't comment. Supervisor Wu, I wonder if your Chamber of Commerce sells masks? The kind that is quite realistic. Mask? Wu Baiqiu looked at Murongyu suspiciously. Was he suspecting that Murongyu took out the Bada token just to find a mask? In the cultivation world, there were many things like masks. The Bada Chamber of Commerce sold them outside. However, Murongyu actually came to find him. It was obvious that the masks sold outside were not to his liking. It was just an ordinary mask and didn't have much use. After all, in the cultivation world, as long as someone scanned with their spiritual sense, they would immediately know if you were wearing a mask. And it was obvious that Murongyu didn't need that kind of mask. What he needed was a high-precision one that even ordinary experts wouldn't be able to discover. Wu Baiqiu frowned slightly and pondered. Suddenly, he slapped his thigh and said to Murongyu happily, "Mr. Murongyu, please wait a moment." Before he finished speaking, Wu Baiqiu hurriedly left the room. Seeing Wu Baiqiu's performance, Murongyu knew that there was hope. This time, he needed to rely on his relationship with the Xianyue sect to go to the extreme heaven realm. But he definitely couldn't use his original appearance, because the extreme heaven realm was controlled by those big sections. At that time, people like Sun Pingxi and Zhuang Ningguang would definitely be present. If they found out Murongyu's identity, he probably wouldn't be able to enter the extreme heaven realm. Moreover, Zhuang Ningguang and the others would probably make a move on the spot. Therefore, he had to temporarily change his identity. Originally, he could rely on the power of the Bada Chamber of Commerce to enter the extreme heaven realm, but he didn't want to owe them too many favors. When it came to favors, it was better not to owe them. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to repay them. Not long after, Wu Baiqiu walked back with a sandalwood box in his hands. Then, he placed the sandalwood box on the table next to Murongyu and said to Murongyu with a smile, "Mr. Murong, you've come to the right place to look for masks. Many years ago, I obtained 3 exquisitely made human skin masks. I wonder if they're to your liking?" A mask of human quality. Murongyu suddenly felt a little creeped out. Although he had heard of such things, he felt a little disgusted when he thought that he might be wearing it on his face. However, he knew that in this world, only a mask of human quality was the most realistic. And since Wu Baiqiu said so, these 3 masks were actually not bad. Out of curiosity, Murongyu still opened the sandalwood box. After a faint sandalwood fragrance, Murongyu saw 3 masks as thin as cicada's wings lying quietly in the box. Murongyu took out one of them and looked at it. It was as thin as cicada's wings and almost transparent. But Because it was made of human quality, it was the same color as human skin. This was the face of a young man, and his appearance was somewhat ordinary. Holding in his hand, it felt cold to the touch. Morong pinched this thin mass with his hand and found that the texture of this mask was very soft, very tough, and good to the touch. Then Morong looked at the other two masks. One was a middle-aged man, and the third was an old man. The three masks covered young, middle-aged, and old men. It was a complete set of masks. The texture looked good, but he didn't know how it would feel to wear it. Morong signaled Wu Baiqiu to bring a mirror, and then he directly put on the mask of the young man. Wearing the thin mask on his face, he first felt a chill on his face. However, not long after, this feeling disappeared. At this moment, Morong had an illusion that the mask seemed to have merged with his face. After putting it on, Morong looked at the mirror. At this time, he had obviously changed into another person. Then, his face made various movements. In this way, he was surprised to find that although he wore the mask, the expression on his face was the same as if he didn't wear the mask. It didn't look like he was wearing a mask. This mask was magical. How is it? Morong looked at Wu Baiqiu and asked. Wu Baiqiu looked at Morong seriously, and then said with a smile, "If I didn't see you wearing this mask with my own eyes, I really wouldn't know that this is not your original face." Chapter 129. Even your spiritual sense can't detect the flaws. Morong asked again. Wu Baiqiu quickly nodded. Morong's heart settled. Although Wu Baiqiu's strength wasn't great, she was still a fusion body cultivator. If even his spiritual sense couldn't detect it, then as long as he was careful, those transcending tribulation or transformation stage cultivators shouldn't be able to detect it either. After trying on the other two masks, Morong finally put on the mask that looked like a young man. These three masks are not bad. I want them. How about the price? Morong didn't ask Wu Baiqiu if she was willing to sell them. He directly put away the remaining two masks in the Hichu, Luoshu world. These three masks are my gift to you, Wu Baiqiu said with a smile. Morong nodded. Since he didn't want to take the money, it wasn't like he didn't want to pay too much. So he said, "When I see great Elder Qiyang in the future, I will put in a few good words for you." As he spoke, he patted Wu Baiqiu's shoulder with a look that said, "I'm very satisfied with your work." Hearing this, Wu Baiqiu was overjoyed. Who is Great Elder Qiyang? The Great Elder of the Bada Chamber of Commerce was definitely a person who could cover the sky with one hand. As long as he said a word, he could leave this small town and enter the headquarters of the Bada Chamber of Commerce to work. Immediately, Wu Baiqiu saw Morong out with tears of gratitude. However, before going out, Morong borrowed Wu Baiqiu's house and took off his black robe. When he thought of those wretched men on the street outside, he felt a chill. Yu Mengqing waited alone in the courtyard. When she didn't see Morong come out, she couldn't help but feel a little impatient. While she was constantly looking around and cursing Morong in her heart, she saw a middle-aged man respectfully escorting a young man out of the room. Yu Mengqing only glanced at the two people indifferently and didn't pay much attention to them. This was because she didn't know these two people. However, what made her feel strange was that these two people actually walked straight towards her. Yu Mengqing thought that they were going to pass by her, so she dodged to the side. But at this moment, the ordinary-looking young man stood in front of her and looked at her with a smile. "Little girl, what are you looking around for? Don't tell me you want to be a thief." Yu Mengqing was furious when a stranger suddenly said that. However, she quickly came to her senses. This voice and this tone were so familiar. It was Morong, that hooligan. However, the young man in front of him did not look like Morong. "Who are you?" Yu Mengqing looked at Morong suspiciously and asked cautiously. "Your man." Morong chuckled. "Go to hell." Yu Mengqing flew into a rage and kicked Morong hard. Morong's figure flashed and dodged her attack. Then he said to Wu Baiqiu, "Supervisor Wu, there's no need to send us off. We can leave by ourselves. Girl, don't make trouble. Don't tell me you don't know who I am." The last sentence was said to Yu Mengqing. "Damn hooligan, sooner or later I will beat you to death," Yu Mengqing said fiercely. At this time, if she still didn't know Murong-yu, then she was really an idiot. However, what shocked her the most was that Murong-yu had suddenly changed his appearance. Could it be that he changed his appearance? It's just a mask. You don't want to make things difficult for your mother, right? Murong-yu chuckled. Let me see. Yu Mengqing was very curious. She grabbed Murong-yu's face with one hand. Murong-yu quickly dodged and said angrily, Girl, what do you want to do? I want to see your real face. Yu Mengqing did not give up. Didn't you see my real face long ago? I suspect you've always been wearing a mask. That's right. My original appearance is just that of an old man. It's best if you don't look at me, or you'll be frightened. Murong-yu was speechless. He couldn't be bothered with the crazy lass and walked out by himself. Yu Mengqing pouted. She really suspected that Murong-yu used to wear a mask. Therefore, on the way, she wanted to sneak attack and tear off the mask on Murong-yu's face. However, Murong-yu avoided her in advance. Murong-yu was too lazy to mess around with this crazy girl. He used his fastest speed and flew in the direction of the Xianyue sect. When he used the army formula at full speed, he left Yu Mengqing, who was in the out-of-body stage, behind by 10 streets. This damn hooligan, damn pervert, his speed is too abnormal. Yu Mengqing was behind Murong-yu, but she was constantly cursing in her heart. Stop, don't run. Just as Murong-yu and Yu Mengqing were slowly flying in the direction of the Xianyue sect and passing by a secular country, an angry shout came from the backyard. Hearing this angry shout, Murong-yu and Yu Mengqing couldn't help but look at each other. Was someone going to rob them? Thinking that he was going to be robbed, Murong-yu felt funny in his heart. In front of a great thief like him, someone actually wanted to rob him? Wasn't this going to make people laugh to death? But it had always been Murong-yu who robbed others. Yu Mengqing also felt a burst of anger in her heart. Immediately, the two of them stopped and looked back. However, with this look, they found that they seemed to have misunderstood. A group of people behind them were rushing towards them like a stream of light, but their target did not seem to be them, but the young man between them. The young man was also in the revolving reflection stage. However, his speed was actually much faster than the average revolving reflection stage cultivator. He was even faster than a fusion stage cultivator by a bit. Therefore, although the strength of the group behind him was high and low, and there were even heartbeat stage cultivators chasing after him, they could not catch up for a while. However, Murong-yu only took one look at this unlucky person who was being chased and knew that if there was no miracle today, this unlucky person who was being chased would definitely be caught by the group behind him. In addition to this guy's body being covered in wounds, his aura was also very weak, and his face was pale without any blood. It seemed that he was about to use up all his true spirit chi, like a lamp that had run out of oil. However, this guy's cultivation was really ordinary, so why was his speed so fast? Murong-yu couldn't help but look over in surprise. This guy's strength was not good, but the reason why his speed was so fast was completely because of the flying sword he was standing on. Spirit weapon. Could it be that this guy is related to some big figure in a big sect? A mere revolving reflection stage cultivator has a spirit weapon. No wonder this guy is being chased by others. Murong-yu's eyes narrowed slightly. If he had nothing and suddenly met a cultivation rookie on a spirit weapon, he would probably not be able to resist snatching the spirit weapon. He guessed that the group behind him was most likely chasing after him because of the spirit weapon he was standing on. Zhang Ao, who was nearing the end of his life, could only blindly run forward. He knew that he had a deep blood feud and must escape from his pursuit. Later on, when his cultivation was successful, he would come back for revenge. However, the people behind him were really too strong. He was just a mere revolving reflection stage cultivator, and he was simply not their match. If not for the flying sword under his feet, he would have already been dismembered by the swords of those people. At this time, Zhang Ao only had one thought. I must escape. I must come back alive for revenge. Even if he died today, his clan's spirit weapon could not be given to these blood enemies who had killed his entire clan. Zhang Ao, who was running away, suddenly discovered that two people had appeared in front of him. A youth was standing on a flying sword, looking in his direction with a look of astonishment. Beside the young man was a beautiful girl who was floating in the air. An expert. A glimmer of hope suddenly rose in Zhang Ao's heart. Although he was only at the revolving reflection stage, he was not an ignorant person. He naturally knew what it meant to fly physically. That was at least an out-of-body stage cultivator. Shua. With hope rising in his heart, Zhang Ao instantly increased his speed to the limit, rushing directly in front of Murong Yu and Yu Mengqing. Then, seeing Zhang Ao quickly fly over, Murong Yu's heart stirred. Just as he was about to make way for him, he was shocked to see Zhang Ao kneel down in front of them, kneeling on the flying sword. What's going on? Murong Yu and Yu Mengqing were stunned, not understanding what was going on. Zhang Ao suddenly said with an agitated expression, "Seniors, please save me. If seniors can save this lowly one's life, this lowly one will offer up the spirit weapon with both hands. In the future, I will work like a cow or a horse without complaint." What's going on? Murong Yu and Yu Mengqing were speechless. It seemed that this guy was asking for help. However, hearing Zhang Ao's words, the intense anger, murderous intent, and hatred in his words caused Yu Mengqing to frown slightly. Of course, Zhang Ao's emotions were not directed at Murong Yu and Yu Mengqing, but at the pursuers. Shua, shua, shua. Just like that, the people chasing after them had already surrounded them. More than 10 people surrounded Murong Yu and the other two. However, when they saw Yu Mengqing floating in the air, they were shocked by her cultivation level and did not dare to make a move. "Seniors, please save me." Seeing that Murong Yu and Yu Mengqing did not respond, Zhang Ao lowered his head even more and begged again. Whether he could survive today depended on whether the two in front of him could lend a helping hand. What's going on? Murong Yu looked at Zhang Ao and asked. He was not a good person and would not act like an idiot to save someone on the road just because they were asking for help. He had to get to the bottom of this matter and know whether he should save the person he wanted to save. If it was worth saving, Murong Yu would lend a helping hand. Murong Yu would not care no matter how many things you gave him. It was just a grade 1 spiritual weapon, and Murong Yu had plenty of them. "Senior, he's a traitor of our Aurora sect. He stole our Aurora sect's spiritual weapon, Flying Sword, and is being chased by us. I hope that Senior can give our Aurora sect some face. We want to deal with this traitor personally." Before Zhang Ao could say anything, a heartbeat stage cultivator from the Aurora sect spoke. Murong Yu squinted his eyes slightly, but was not moved. He only looked at Zhang Ao. "Bullshit. You bastards from the Aurora sect. You bastards. Goddamn bastards. My Zhang family obtained this spiritual weapon by accident. However, you bastards found out about it and slaughtered my Zhang family. I was the only one who managed to escape. You killed hundreds of my family members just to snatch this spiritual weapon." Chapter 130. Zhang Ao raised his head and looked at the disciples of the Polar Light sect with a ferocious expression. He gritted his teeth, and his face was full of resentment. He looked as if he wanted to pounce on the disciples of the Polar Light sect and tear them into pieces. This spiritual artifact was lost by our Polar Light sect. After your Zhang clan obtained it, not only did you not return it, you even wanted to take it for yourself. We just want to take back our own spiritual artifact, the heart-stirring stage cultivator continued. Bullsh *T. Who doesn't know that your Polar Light sect has done all kinds of evil and tyrannical things nearby? It's not the first time your Polar Light sect has done something like exterminating our Zhang family. Zhang Ao gritted his teeth. If not for his lack of strength, he would have pounced on them. Looking at the expressions of both parties, Murong Yu already had a plan. He immediately looked at Zhang Ao with a gloomy face and asked, "Is your Zhang family a cultivation family?" Zhang Ao quickly shook his head. "Our Zhang family is just an ordinary secular martial arts family. As for me, I only managed to reach my current cultivation level because I accidentally obtained a cultivation technique." Speaking of this, Zhang Ao looked at the people of the Polar Light sect with a face full of resentment. "For the spiritual weapon in my hand, They actually disregarded the restraint of the cultivation world that forbids violence in the secular world and killed more than 100 people of my Zhang family. These people are too cruel. After hearing this, Yu Mingqing's face also turned gloomy and murderous aura emanated from her body. Murong Yu nodded and said, I understand. Then, he looked at the disciples of the Polar Light sect and said, Is what Zhang Ao said true? Both of you, please do our Polar Light sect a favor. We owe you a favor. The disciple of the Polar Light sect who spoke before stepped forward and said. Although he avoided answering the question, Murong Yu had already gotten the answer he was looking for from his words. With a sneer, Murong Yu suddenly patted the storage bag floating at his waist. Innumerable sword technique, Murong Yu shouted coldly. Then, hundreds of flying swords shot out from the storage bag at his waist. They transformed into hundreds of millions of sword shadows in the void and covered the entire sky. Like lightning, they strangled the dozen disciples of the Polar Light sect from all directions. The Polar Light sect's disciples did not manage to react in time. The myriad of sword lights slashed past, leaving behind a series of agonizing cries and a bloody mist that filled the sky. Swish! As soon as the flying swords flew out, the dozen or so people were instantly killed and turned into a bloody mist. They died cleanly. Murong Yu waved his hand, and the 100 flying swords formed into a river and quickly went into the storage bag on his waist. Blurg, seeing this scene, Yu Mengqing and Zhang Ao were both stunned. After a long while, Yu Mengqing finally reacted. Smelling the bloody stench that filled the air, her stomach churned and she couldn't help but retch. Zhang Ao, who was still in shock, did not react. Murong Yu, you are too cruel. After a long time, Yu Mengqing finally calmed down. She walked over and looked at Murong Yu with dissatisfaction. At this time, Yu Mengqing remembered that this Murong Yu was not as harmless as he looked. Instead, he was a notorious devil that was well known in the world of cultivators. Today, seeing Murong Yu's decisiveness and ruthlessness, Yu Mengqing finally saw the other side of Murong Yu. Murong Yu shrugged his shoulders indifferently and said, Those dregs deserve to die. Just look at the Zhang family. Because of a flying sword, they ruined the entire family, leaving only one person alive. In my opinion, we should kill our way to the Polar Light sect and wipe them out completely. Yu Mengqing was silent. Although Murong Yu's methods were ruthless and bloody, those who were killed, which one of them didn't have hands stained with blood? Killing them was just to get rid of evil for the people. Zhang Ao has written about Senior Murong Yu's life-saving grace. At this time, Zhang Ao finally reacted and bowed deeply to Murong Yu. Well, no one is chasing you. You can go. Murong Yu waved his hand and said. After speaking to Zhang Ao, Murong Yu turned to say goodbye to Yu Mengqing and was about to leave. At this time, Zhang Ao finally reacted. That's right, Murong Yu had saved him. Furthermore, Murong Yu had killed all the Aurora Gate's disciples in an instant. However, Murong Yu wasn't after the spiritual artifacts on his body, nor was he after his life. It seemed that Murong Yu saved him just because he sympathized with his experience. Murong Yu's behavior shocked Zhang Ao. He also saw Murong Yu's attack just now. 100 flying swords, but none of them looked like spiritual weapons. Does he really not want a spiritual weapon? Zhang Ao looked at the spiritual weapon in his hand. It was because of this spiritual weapon that his family was massacred overnight. It could be said that everything started because of this spiritual weapon. With his strength and possession of a spiritual weapon, it was normal for him to be hunted down and schemed against. With his strength, he didn't deserve a spiritual weapon at all. Murong Yu and his companion were strong and had saved him. They were the best owners of this spiritual weapon. Thinking of this, Zhang Ao gritted his teeth and said, Seniors, please wait. While speaking, Zhang Ao quickly caught up and stopped Murong Yu and his companion. Then he held up the spiritual weapon with both hands and said, Seniors, you saved my life. Zhang Ao has nothing to repay you, so I can only offer this spiritual weapon. A strange look flashed across Murong Yu's face. He looked at Zhang Ao and said, Zhang Ao, are you really going to give this flying sword to me? You should know that your experience was all because of this flying sword. Zhang Ao shook his head and said with a determined expression, It's because of this that I can't keep this spiritual weapon. Therefore, Senior, please accept it. Zhang Ao, I think you should understand one thing. I saved you not because I coveted your spiritual weapon. I just couldn't stand the blood-stained hands of the Polar Light sect. So, you don't have to thank me. Your family was massacred by the Polar Light sect. If I'm not wrong, you will definitely take revenge on the Polar Light sect. But with your strength, you are no match for the Polar Light sect. With the help of this flying sword spirit artifact, you will have a greater chance of success. Zhang Ao shook his head and said with a determined expression, I will definitely slaughter the Polar Light sect, but not now. Revenge is a dish best served cold. I won't attack the Polar Light sect when I'm not confident. I will destroy the Polar Light sect after I'm strong enough. By then, the spiritual weapon won't be of much use to me. If you don't accept my spiritual weapon for saving my life, I will feel uneasy. This kid, I've never seen anyone forced to give a spiritual weapon to others. Murong Yu was speechless. At the same time, he said, You can sell this spiritual weapon. It's worth at least 50 million recovery pills. 50 million recovery pills? Zhang Ao was instantly stunned. At this moment, the thought of not giving the spiritual weapon to Murong Yu flashed across his mind. However, he quickly shook his head and cut off the thought in his mind. Please accept it, Senior. This guy was really stubborn. Murong Yu was helpless. Just as he was about to continue to refuse, an arrogant voice came from afar. Since you don't want it, give it to me. Before the voice died down, a figure flew over from afar. At the same time, before the person arrived, a big hand shattered the world, skimmed through space and time, and quickly grabbed the spiritual weapon in Zhang Ao's hand. In an instant, the faces of Murong Yu and the other two changed. Out-of-body stage cultivator. A strange look flashed across Yu Mengqing's face. Then, she took a step forward and punched the big hand in front of her. Boom! After an earth-shattering sound, the big hand in the void was directly shattered by Yu Mengqing. The power of Yu Mengqing's attack was also scattered, turning into the most primitive essence of the world and disappearing between heaven and earth. There's actually an out-of-body stage cultivator. At this moment, a phantom flashed, and a figure landed not far in front of Murong Yu and Zhang Ao. It was an indifferent old man. At this moment, he was looking at Yu Mengqing with a surprised expression. When he saw the old man, Zhang Ao couldn't help but gnash his teeth and say, People from the Polar Light sect. Murong Yu looked over and saw that the old man's clothes were similar to the Polar Light sect's disciple from before. It seemed that Zhang Ao recognized the other party's identity because of this. Haha, kid, you have good eyes. I'm the elder of the Polar Light sect, Huarong. The old man, who was Huarong, laughed. Then, he looked at the ground full of minced meat and frowned. His face suddenly turned gloomy. What did you do to them? Didn't you see it all? I killed them all, Murong Yu sneered. You're courting death, Huarong shouted angrily. He stretched out his big hand and quickly grabbed at Murong Yu with the power of shattering heaven and earth. Murong Yu just sneered and turned a blind eye to it. Instead, he turned to look at Yu Mengqing and said, Girl, is this old man an out-of-body stage cultivator? I'll leave him to you to practice. Okay, leave it to me. Yu Mengqing's face revealed an excited expression, which made Murong Yu stunned. Originally, he thought that Yu Mengqing would be very reluctant even if she agreed, but he didn't expect this girl to be a battle-hungry person. Old man, your opponent is me. Yu Mengqing also stretched out her big hand. After shattering Huarong's big hand, she jumped into the air and pounced on Huarong. Huarong sneered, Then I'll take care of you first. Today, none of you can escape. As he spoke, he went up and fought with Yu Mengqing. Both of their strengths were about the same, so they were evenly matched. Murong Yu narrowed his eyes slightly. After watching for a while, he felt that it would take a while for the two of them to determine the winner. So, he said to Zhang Ao, Let's go to the mountain over there. As he spoke, he directly flew to the mountain in the distance on his flying sword. Zhang Ao looked at Murong Yu in surprise, and then looked at Yu Mengqing, who was fighting in the distance. He wanted to call out to Murong Yu, "Aren't you worried about that senior?" But after thinking about it, he still didn't say it. He could only take out his flying sword and follow Murong Yu to a mountain in the distance. When Zhang Ao arrived at the top of the mountain, he found Murong Yu sitting on top of a boulder, watching the battle between Yu Mengqing and Lu Li with great interest. "Zhang Ao, come and sit. This is the best place to watch the battle." Seeing Zhang Ao come up, Murong Yu grinned, then pointed to the huge rock next to him and said, Chapter 131. Zhang Ao was speechless. He could only shake his head. How could he dare to sit with Murong Yu? Furthermore, he was not in the mood to continue watching. He was worried about the battle in front of him. After all, he was now standing on Murong Yu's side. Naturally, he did not want to see Yu Mengqing defeated. Seeing that Zhang Ao was not coming over, Murong Yu did not mind. He continued to watch the battle in front of him with great interest. However, not long after, he frowned and muttered to himself, "This little girl doesn't seem to be a match for that old fellow Huarong." Although the two of them were on par in terms of strength, Yu Mengqing clearly did not have much experience in fighting. On the other hand, Huarong was a seasoned veteran. Every move he made was vicious and deadly. Furthermore, this old fellow was truly sinister. He specifically targeted Yu Mengqing's weak points. What made Yu Mengqing grit her teeth the most was that this old bastard had specifically targeted her chest and other sensitive areas. He was utterly shameless. Boom, boom, boom. The battle between the two great out-of-body stage cultivators erupted with terrifying power. Terrifying shockwaves swept across the heavens and the earth, shattering the surrounding mountains. One by one, the huge mountain peaks were flattened by the two of them. Yu Mengqing did not have much experience in fighting. Furthermore, under the shameless attacks of Huarong, she was even more enraged. As a result, she lost her sense of propriety and fell to the ground. "Little girl, put in more effort." Just then, Murong Yu, who was sitting on a huge rock in the distance and watching the battle with great interest, suddenly spoke up. Yu Mengqing turned her head to take a look. When she saw Murong Yu's actions, she was nearly kicked to death. She was distracted for a moment. Rip! In a moment of carelessness, Yu Mengqing's right sleeve was torn off. Yu Mengqing was enraged. Her small hand reached into the air, and in the next moment, a flying sword with a powerful aura appeared in her hand. She swung her sword, and a sword ray tore through the heavens and earth. It was as if a huge crack had appeared in the sky. The gigantic sword ray slashed viciously towards Huarong. Spiritual weapon. Huarong's expression changed. He cried out in alarm, and his body swayed, evading the attack of the sword ray. Rumble. The shocking sword light ruthlessly chopped down on a towering mountain in the distance. After a loud explosion, the towering mountain disappeared in an instant. It had been smashed into pieces. With the spirit artifact in hand, Yu Mengqing's strength increased slightly. She clenched her teeth and swung her sword at Huarong again and again. For a moment, Huarong was no match for him at all. He could only dodge continuously. It looked like Yu Mengqing had the upper hand. However, in the distance, Murong Yu secretly shook his head. Huarong was a cunning old fox. Although he seemed to be in a difficult situation and was only dodging, he seemed to be plotting something. He was probably waiting for an opportunity to counterattack. Indeed, not long after, Huarong found a flaw in Yu Mengqing's defense and threw a fierce punch, shattering Yu Mengqing's sword ray. Even the spiritual weapon in her hand was sent flying out of her hand. Puff! Yu Mengqing's mind was injured. She opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. "Oh no, the little girl is going to lose," Murong Yu suddenly exclaimed from afar. Then, Zhang Ao saw him slowly stand up from the huge rock. He grabbed at the air, and in the next moment, a dazzling golden bow appeared in his hand. Although he saw that Yu Mengqing was in danger, Murong Yu still took his time to retrieve the heaven-earth bow from the Hichu Luo Shu. It was the dazzling golden bow that Zhang Ao had seen earlier. Was Morong Yu going to use the Heaven-Earth bow now? Based on his current strength, was he able to use the Heaven-Earth bow? The answer was unknown because this was also the first time Morong Yu had used the Heaven-Earth bow. After dispelling the Heaven-Earth bow, Morong Yu's large hand continued to grab at the air. Then, one of the dazzling golden heaven-shaking arrows, the human arrow, appeared in his hand. After placing the heaven-shaking arrow into the Heaven-Earth bow, Morong Yu secretly channeled energy into his hands and pulled the Heaven-Earth bow open. However, creak, creak, the Heaven-Earth bow only made a soft sound and the bowstring was pulled open slightly before returning to normal. My apologies, this divine bow is a little difficult to pull open. Morong Yu smiled apologetically. Then, he continued to concentrate and hold his breath. As for Zhang Ao, he was speechless as he looked at Morong Yu. On the other side, Yu Mengqing's spirit weapon longsword had been sent flying. Moreover, she had spat out a mouthful of blood because of the damage to her body and mind. This caused Yu Mengqing to panic a little. After a moment of panic, she looked even more helpless. In an instant, Huarong seized the opportunity and unleashed all sorts of sinister moves, each one of them deadly in an attempt to kill Yu Mengqing. Yu Mengqing was infuriated, but the more she acted like this, the more flustered she became. It was only a matter of time before she lost. At this moment, even Zhang Ao could tell that something was wrong with Yu Mengqing. Although Yu Mengqing had reached the out-of-body stage at a young age, it was definitely a legend to have done so at the mere age of 16. However, it was obvious that she didn't have much combat experience. Come to think of it, she was so powerful because her sect master's mother had used all sorts of elixirs to help her raise her strength. Otherwise, she wouldn't be in such a sorry state. Boom! Zhang Ao looked worriedly at Yu Mengqing, who was in danger. However, at this moment, an earth-shattering sound came from beside him. Then, a deafening dragon's roar and an incomparably violent aura swept over. Zhang Ao was shocked and was immediately sent flying by the aura that was like a tidal wave. In the distance, Zhang Ao somersaulted and saw a scene that shocked him. In the distance, there were 100 incomparably condensed shadows of black coiled dragons circling above Morong Yu's head. The black coiled dragons circled continuously and roared ferociously. They were so condensed that they were close to materializing. At this moment, Morong Yu suddenly yelled. The power of 100 coiled dragons poured into his hands, and he pulled the Heaven-Earth bow into a semicircle. However, it was only a semicircle. In fact, it was only a small semicircle. Even so, the veins on Morong Yu's forehead were bulging and his face was ferocious. It was obvious that he had used up all his strength to pull the Heaven-Earth bow into a semicircle. Zhang Ao was shocked. He was shocked by Morong Yu's strength and the terrifying power of the Heaven-Earth bow in his hands. Girl, get out of the way. I'll kill him. Before he could finish his sentence, Morong Yu seemed to have exhausted all his strength and could no longer draw the bow. He loosened his right hand, and the golden heaven-shaking arrow let out a chi sound. It turned into a ray of golden light and disappeared on the spot, shooting towards Huarong, who was in the distance. When they heard Morong Yu's roar, Huarong and Yu Mengqing, who were in the middle of a great battle, couldn't help but look in the direction of the sound. When they saw it, the two of them couldn't help but feel their souls leave their bodies. They saw a ray of golden light in the distance. It tore through the void at a speed that was countless times faster than any speed they had ever seen. It carried with it an aura that made them feel death, an arrow that pierced the heavens. Wherever the golden light passed, the void would shatter and explode. It was as if the heavens were about to shatter under this golden light. It was extremely terrifying. Yu Mengqing didn't feel anything. She only felt that the golden light contained an extremely dangerous aura. A thought appeared in her mind. If the golden light's target was her, then she wouldn't be able to defend herself no matter what. In the face of this golden light, all of her resistance would be futile. At this moment, a sense of despair appeared in Yu Mengqing's heart. As for Huarong, His expression changed greatly at this moment. An extremely strong aura of death rose from the bottom of his heart. Huarong knew that no matter what he did, it would all be futile. Huarong roared angrily and increased his speed to the maximum. He then turned around and tried to escape into the distance. Bang! However, just as he turned around, the golden light had already torn through the obstruction of time. It shattered the heavens and earth and shot through the heavens. It directly pierced through Huarong's back, bringing with it a demonic mist of blood. Feeling a sharp pain in his chest, Huarong couldn't help but lower his head to take a look. He was shocked to find that not only had his chest been pierced through by the golden light, but there was also a large hole in it. Seeing this large hole, Huarong didn't know why, but he wanted to laugh out loud. Because he wasn't dead. As an out-of-body stage cultivator, such a large hole in his chest wasn't a fatal injury. As long as he could escape, there would be a day when he would be able to recover. More importantly, he wasn't dead. Huarong was about to laugh out loud. Just as he was about to continue escaping, his body suddenly shook and exploded. Bang! His entire body actually exploded into pieces, instantly exploding into a cloud of blood mist. His laughter turned into a blood-curdling scream. It was the last sound he made in this world. Whoosh! After the heaven-quake arrow pierced through Huarong's body, it turned into a golden light and shot back. On the hillside in the distance, Murong stretched out his hand and recalled the heaven-quake arrow. He placed it back into the Hichu, Luoshu world together with the bow of heaven and earth. He sat down on his, but finally laid on a huge rock without a care for his image. Just now, he had used up all of his energy. At this moment, he didn't have any energy left in his body. 100 heavenly moon energy was barely enough for him to shoot an arrow. However, the power of the heaven quake arrow wasn't just for show. It was really too powerful. Murong thought to himself as he lay on the huge rock without a care for his image. With a flip of his hand, he stuffed handfuls of energy recovery pills into his mouth. This scene shocked Zhang Ao even more. In the distance, after Huarong was shot by Murong arrow, he exploded into a cloud of blood. Yu Mengqing was originally near Huarong. After seeing this scene, she was instantly stunned. It was only when the bloody mist fell from the sky that she reacted in shock. She circulated her energy to form a shield to protect herself, isolating herself from the bloody mist that was drifting down from the outside. However, even so, her body was covered in Huarong's blood. After a long moment of shock, Yu Mengqing picked up her spiritual weapon and flew towards Murong. When she returned to the hillside, she saw Murong lying on a huge rock without a care for his image. At this moment, Murong was swallowing handfuls of rejuvenation pills as if they were free. Chapter 132. Give it to me. Yu Mengqing walked up to Murong soundlessly and stretched out her hand. Murong had more or less recovered his strength after eating so many origin-returning pills. At this moment, he sat up and looked at Yu Mengqing in confusion. He really did not know what Yu Mengqing wanted. Recovery pills, Yu Mengqing said angrily. Can you be more specific? If you don't tell me, how would I know that you want recovery pills? Murong shot a glance at Yu Mengqing. With a wave of his hand, he took out a handful of rejuvenation pills from his storage pouch and threw them at Yu Mengqing. Murong then looked at Zhang Ao, who was standing to the side. He reached into his storage pouch and took out another handful of rejuvenation pills. He tossed them to Zhang Ao and said, "You've nearly exhausted all of your strength. Take a few rejuvenation pills and recover." Zhang Ao took the recovery pills and was a little confused. He did not know whether to accept it or not. This guy has a lot of recovery pills. It would be a waste if you don't take it, Yu Mengqing said and sat down cross-legged. She swallowed the recovery pills and began to recover her strength. Hearing this, Zhang Ao did not refuse and began to recover his strength. Not long after, Zhang Ao was the first to recover his strength. Yu Mengqing was much stronger than Zhang Ao, and her recovery was slower. After a long time, Yu Mengqing finally recovered her strength, and her injuries were completely healed. She stood up and stretched out her hand to Murongyu. Murongyu glared at her and said unhappily, "Your strength is already recovered. What else do you want?" "I don't have any more recovery pills," Yu Mengqing said. "Go home and ask your mother for more. You're too stingy. If we meet any more masters on the way, I won't attack anymore." "You bastard, you could have killed him, but you wanted me to do it." Yu Mengqing looked at the blood on her body and said unhappily. Murongyu was speechless. He did not know who was the one who was so excited in the beginning. Besides, although he had the ability to kill Huarong, but you have too little experience. I'm training you, you know, to train you. At the same time, Murongyu threw a storage bag to Yu Mengqing. Inside, it was 1,000,000 recovery pills. Yu Mengqing nodded in satisfaction and said, "Wait for me. I'll be right back." With that, she flew away. However, it took Murongyu half a day for them to return. This caused Murongyu to think that the lass had been kidnapped and was on the verge of searching for her. When Yu Mengqing came back, she looked completely new. It was obvious that she had gone to the nearby river to wash and change her clothes. This made Murongyu feel a little regretful. If he had known earlier, he would have peeked. "Let's go." After Yu Mengqing returned, Murongyu immediately jumped onto the flying sword and flew forward. That's not right. The Mystic Moon Sect is in that direction. Who said we're going to the Mystic Moon Sect? Let's go to the Polar Light Sect first. These bastards made me lose so many recovery pills. I must get back the money from them, Murongyu said fiercely and then sped up to leave. The Polar Light Sect was a secluded sect in this area. There were as many sects like this in the cultivation world as there were grains of sand in the Ganges. However, the Polar Light Sect also had 300 to 400 disciples. However, the strength of these people was really too weak. Huarong, who was at the out-of-body stage, could become their elder. One could imagine how weak this sect was. On an unexpected peak in the Polar Light Sect, Murongyu and the other two were lurking here. "Senior, are we really going to flatten the Polar Light Sect?" Zhang Ao looked at Murongyu with a trace of excitement on his face. His entire family was destroyed by the Polar Light Sect. Now that Murongyu was going to flatten the Polar Light Sect, it meant that he would get his revenge. How could he not be happy? Moreover, the Polar Light Sect caused people to be angry in this area. Flattening them would only bring benefits and no harm. Murongyu nodded. Looking at the Polar Light Sect in the distance, he muttered to himself. Although the strength of the Polar Light Sect is not very good, their sect master is an expert at the initial stage of the Avatar stage. He is even stronger than me. We are not his opponent. In addition to the sect master of the Polar Light Sect who had reached the spirit severing stage, there were a few out-of-body stage cultivators. As for the rest, most of them were at the foundation establishment stage and revolving reflection stage. They were basically no threat to Murongyu and the other two. "Big gangster, don't you have a golden skeleton? Why don't you release the golden skeleton and kill them all?" Yu Mengqing looked sideways at Murongyu and said. Murongyu rolled his eyes. If it was so simple, why would he need to consider it for so long? This time, eliminating the Polar Light Sect was one purpose, but plundering the Polar Light Sect was also another purpose. If Murongyu released the golden skeleton, the area within 100 miles would be crushed. At that time, not to mention plundering, even the Polar Light Sect would not be left. Yu Mengqing was speechless. She didn't expect the power of the golden skeleton to be so powerful. Zhang Ao, who was next to her, was shocked again. However, this guy had gradually become accustomed to Murongyu's shocking actions. However, this guy was still a rogue cultivator. He hadn't even heard of Murongyu's name. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would be even more shocked. After pondering for a while, Murongyu turned to look at Yu Mengqing and said with a smile on his face, "Girl, how about I give you a task?" Seeing Murongyu's smile, Yu Mengqing instinctively felt that this was a conspiracy. So, without waiting for Murongyu to continue, she shook her head and refused. "I can deal with the cultivators below the out-of-body stage, but you can deal with the sect master of the severed soul stage yourself." Murongyu rolled his eyes. If I can deal with it, I don't need you. Girl, this time you just need to lure him out. I will assassinate him here with a divine arrow. While speaking, Morongyu took out the Chinquan bow again. Yu Mengqing rolled her eyes and suddenly came up with a plan. Of course, she knew that Huarong was killed by this divine bow. At that time, Huarong, who was in the out-of-body stage, was killed without even having time to react. Maybe this divine bow could also kill the sect master of the Severed Soul stage. However, she would not go to lure out the sect master of the Polar Light sect, no matter what. The other party's cultivation could definitely kill her in seconds. She was afraid that before she could lure him out, she would have already been killed. Morongyu, you are faster than me. You are the best person to lure him out. I will shoot him here. Yu Mengqing said with a smile. Morongyu shook his head. Yu Mengqing suddenly became angry. You bastard, are you afraid that I will steal your divine bow? Morongyu was startled. He had never thought of this. Not to mention that the Chinquan bow had recognized him as its master. Even if Yu Mengqing took it away, he could take it back with a thought. Unless someone forcibly erased Morongyu's essence, blood, and spirit on the Chinquan bow. But obviously, Yu Mengqing did not have this ability. The most important thing was that even if Morongyu gave the Chinquan bow to Yu Mengqing, she could not use it. He had recognized the Chinquan bow as its master, and he could barely pull it open in a semicircle with all his strength, let alone Yu Mengqing. Yu Mengqing pouted and was very angry. She simply turned her head and did not look at Morongyu. Morongyu smiled embarrassedly. I am not afraid that you will steal it, but are you sure you could draw the bow? Why not? Yu Mengqing instantly turned her head and jogged to Morongyu's side. She reached out her small hand and was about to pick up the Chinquan bow. Morongyu shrugged and let go of the Chinquan bow. Oh no! The Chinquan bow weighed 108,000 kilograms. Although it was not much pressure for Yu Mengqing, who was at the out-of-body stage, but she was still caught off guard and staggered. At this moment, Morongyu took out the heaven-shaking arrow and handed it to Yu Mengqing, saying, If you could draw the bow, I will lure out that nuisance sect leader. Otherwise, you will go. Okay. Yu Mengqing agreed very quickly. She took the heaven-shaking arrow and was about to draw the bow. However, the Chinquan bow did not move at all. It was as heavy as a divine mountain. Yu Mengqing's small face turned red, but to her disappointment, the Chinquan bow still did not move at all. Impossible! Even the big hooligan can draw the bow. My cultivation level is higher than his. Why can't I draw it? Yu Mengqing's stubborn character came out, and she snorted coldly, boom. After a shocking dragon roar, 10 horned dragons appeared in the void above their heads. Their scales were ferocious, and they emitted a terrifying and ancient aura. They were very powerful. The power of horned dragons was generally at the later stage of the out-of-body stage. As for whether Yu Mengqing was at the later stage of the out-of-body stage, Morongyu could not tell. Although Yu Mengqing used all her strength, the Chinquan bow still did not move at all. Yu Mengqing was helpless and angry. In the end, she threw the Chinquan bow and the heaven-shaking arrow at Morongyu's feet and said angrily, I don't want to play anymore. This guy is bullying me. Before she finished speaking, she soared into the sky and flew toward the Aurora sect in the distance. Where are you going? Morongyu hurriedly called out to Yu Mengqing. This girl was crazy and always did things unrestrainedly. I'm going to get the Aurora sect leader. Yu Mengqing said angrily. Hey, come back. I didn't ask you to go over like this. Morongyu was helpless. What are you going to do? Yu Mengqing ran back angrily and glared at Morongyu. She was obviously very angry. Morongyu did not say anything. He only reached out and pulled off the purple ribbon immortal robe from his body and handed it to Yu Mengqing. Purple ribbon immortal robe. When she saw the purple ribbon in Morongyu's hand, Yu Mengqing could not help but exclaim. That day at the World Auction House, she had seen a replica of the purple ribbon immortal robe. Could this be the one from that day? Yu Mengqing muttered in her heart. However, she clearly remembered that the person who bid for the purple ribbon immortal robe was another person. Big hooligan, did you rob someone? Yu Mengqing looked at Murongyu with a suspicious gaze. Murongyu immediately revealed a look of disdain. The one at the auction house that day was just a replica. This one is a genuine immortal robe, an immortal weapon. Wow, an immortal weapon. Yu Mengqing and Zhang Ao immediately exclaimed. After the exclamation, Yu Mengqing looked at Murongyu with joy. Big hooligan, are you giving this immortal robe to me? Murongyu rolled his eyes. Dream on. I'm only lending it to you temporarily. I don't want you to get hurt later. After this matter, you have to return it to me. Yu Mengqing was immediately disappointed. She pouted and said unhappily, You bastard, you have so many treasures. So what if you give one to me? Chapter 133. Big Sister, this is an immortal artifact. It's my only immortal artifact. Your mother is the sect leader of the Xinhua sect. If you want an immortal artifact, why don't you ask her? Murongyu said speechlessly. All right. Yu Mengqing immediately put on the immortal robe and then kept changing the appearance of the robe. In the end, she was still chased away by Murongyu. With the immortal robe on her, Yu Mengqing's confidence soared. She charged towards the Polar Light sect in broad daylight. Murongyu, who was in the distance, didn't know what Yu Mengqing was doing. He only saw her rushing into the Polar Light sect, and then the Polar Light sect was in chaos. The sky collapsed, and the earth cracked. A series of loud sounds came, mixed with waves of screams. Murongyu secretly wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. It seemed that this crazy girl wasn't going to lure out the experts, but to start a massacre. Because, in just a short period of time, under Yu Mengqing's attack, the entire Polar Light sect had suffered heavy losses. Almost all the buildings were destroyed. Zhang Ao, who was beside Murongyu, was also covered in cold sweat. He sighed in his heart. The two people he had accidentally met were each more ferocious than the other. They were both ferocious people. Rumble. In the Polar Light sect, Yu Mengqing had already activated the defensive ability of the immortal robe on her body. Her entire body was enveloped by a layer of faint purple light. She held a spiritual artifact, flying sword in her hand, and fought with a few out-of-body stage cultivators of the laser dream. After all, the purple ribbon immortal robe was an immortal artifact. Moreover, it was activated by an out-of-body stage cultivator. Its defensive ability was really impenetrable. The out-of-body stage expert of the Polar Light sect who bombarded Yu Mengqing's body was completely offset. He couldn't hurt Yu Mengqing at all. Yu Mengqing, on the other hand, did not have anything to worry about. She became very aggressive. The spiritual artifact flying sword in her hand was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, constantly killing the out-of-body stage elders of the Polar Light sect. Massacre. It was simply a massacre. Which scoundrel dares to kill my Polar Light sect disciples? Suddenly, a thunderous voice rang out from afar. Following that, a monstrous hand appeared out of thin air and slapped Yu Mengqing, who was in the middle of a massacre, away. He's here. In the distance, Murongyu's eyes lit up. At the next moment, he saw a green-robed old man floating above the Polar Light sect. Seeing this old man, the corners of Murongyu's mouth curled up slightly. Then he used Heavenly Dragon strength. Draw the bow and shoot. Chi! After the sharp sound of the air being torn apart, the Heaven Quake arrow transformed into a wisp of flowing light that shot violently towards the azure-clothed old man in the sky. The heaven-shaking arrow turned into a streak of golden light and instantly pierced through space. It broke through the obstruction of space and shot out at an extremely terrifying speed. The green-robed old man, who was the sect master of the Polar Light sect, sent Yu Mengqing flying with a slap, just as he was about to find Yu Mengqing and kill her, because he was furious. He had only been cultivating in seclusion for a period of time, but when he realized that something was wrong outside, he immediately rushed out. However, what entered his eyes was a stretch of dilapidated fences and dilapidated walls. It was a complete mess. The entire Polar Light sect buildings were all destroyed, and the ground was covered in blood. The broken limbs of countless Polar Light sect disciples were scattered all over the place. Even a few out-of-body stage elders of the Polar Light sect were killed. If he hadn't acted in time, the last out-of-body stage cultivator of the Polar Light sect would have been killed by Yu Mengqing. At this moment, other than those weak disciples, the only experts in the entire sect were the out-of-body stage elder and the sect master of the Severed Soul stage. Looking at everything around him, the sect master of the Polar Light sect was burning with anger. This was the foundation of the sect that he had single-handedly built, but now it was destroyed by someone else. Just as he was about to chase after Yu Mengqing, suddenly, who was in the Severed Soul stage, keenly felt a deathly aura coming from afar. This deathly aura was so strong that it made the sect master of the Polar Light sect feel a strong sense of uneasiness. He turned his head abruptly and saw a golden light tearing through the void at a speed faster than lightning, tearing towards him. The deathly aura that made him feel deeply uneasy came from this golden light. With a cold snort, the sect master of the Polar Light sect, who was in the Severed Soul stage, didn't escape immediately. Instead, he instantly gathered his strength and slapped out a big hand. The big hand turned into a claw, shaking the heavens and splitting the earth. It covered the sky and the sun as it grabbed at the golden light that was tearing through the void. Overestimating yourself. Seeing the sect master of the Polar Light sect's action, Murong Yu in the distance sneered disdainfully. Sure enough, bang, before the big hand formed by the power could get close to the golden light, which was the heaven-shaking arrow, it was already shattered by the terrifying aura emitted by the heaven-shaking arrow. Not only did the heaven-shaking arrow not slow down, it became even faster. The sect master of the Polar Light sect was shocked. He roared and punched out with all his strength. At the same time, his figure swayed, and he suddenly soared into the sky, flying towards the distance. Rumble. A powerful force violently hit the heaven-shaking arrow. After a loud noise, the heaven-shaking arrow burst out with a dazzling golden light, illuminating the entire world. In a loud noise, the terrifying force that the sect master of the Polar Light sect blasted out was shattered again. However, this time, the heaven-shaking arrow's momentum was also stopped. However, the heaven-shaking arrow. Since the human arrow was known to kill all living things, how could it let the target escape so easily? Chi. The heaven-shaking arrow's speed was slightly stagnant. However, in the next moment, the heaven-shaking arrow burst out with a terrifying golden light in the next moment. With a swoosh, the heaven-shaking arrow actually disappeared on the spot. At this moment, the sect master of the Polar Light sect, who was escaping with all his strength, had already appeared hundreds of miles away. Feeling that he finally got rid of the fatal golden light, he couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief in his heart. His nervous expression also relaxed. Chi. At this moment, the void behind him was instantly torn open by a huge force. In the next moment, a golden light rapidly rushed out. How is this possible? The sect master of the Polar Light sect exclaimed in shock. His figure swayed, and he was about to escape. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt a chill in his chest, and the golden light had already pierced through his chest. Then, he saw that the golden light was actually a golden divine arrow. After the divine arrow pierced through his body, it spun in front of him and then turned into a ray of light again, shooting towards the back. Impossible. The sect master of the Polar Light sect looked at his chest that was pierced through and roared in anger. Boom. After an explosion, the sect master of the Polar Light sect and their elders exploded and turned into a cloud of blood mist. They couldn't be more dead. The heaven-shaking arrow automatically flew back to Murong Yu's side. In the end, it was placed into the Hichu Luoshu world together with the Cosmos Bow. Because he had used the Cosmos Bow for the first time, Murong Yu had already prepared the energy recovery pill. Therefore, after the heaven-shaking arrow killed the sect master of the Polar Light sect, his strength had also recovered to its peak state with a large amount of energy recovery pills. Let's go down. Moron Yu flicked out a flying sword and flew down first. Then, Zhang Ao followed on his flying sword. After being sent flying by the sect master of the Polar Light sect, who was in the spirit severing stage, Yu Mengqing was sent flying dozens of miles away and finally came to a stop after crashing through countless mountains. After getting up, the first thing she did was to check her body to see if there were any injuries. With this, she was immediately shocked by the terrifying defensive power of the purple ribbon immortal robe. She, an out-of-body stage cultivator, was sent flying by a spirit-severing stage cultivator. If it were an ordinary person, they would have been slapped into a cloud of blood mist and couldn't be more dead. However, under the protection of the purple ribbon immortal robe, she actually only felt her blood and chi churning. There was no injury on her body at all. At this time, she saw the heaven-shaking arrow turn into a golden light and shoot towards the sect master of the Polar Light sect. "Old bastard, you're dead this time." Yu Mengqing gritted her teeth and said, feeling extremely happy in her heart. Then, she no longer cared about the sect master of the Polar Light sect. After quickly calming her churning chi and chi, she soared into the air and charged towards the Polar Light sect again with murderous intent. When Murong Yu and Zhang Ao entered the Polar Light sect, Yu Mengqing raised her sword and cut off the head of the remaining out-of-body stage cultivator of the Polar Light sect. At this point, more than half of the Polar Light sect's disciples were killed or injured. The rest scattered like monkeys when the tree fell and had already fled. Yu Mengqing seemed to hate these people very much and just chased after them. At this time, Zhang Ao's eyes were also red. He held a flying sword of the spirit tool level and started a massacre at the Polar Light sect's disciples who were very weak. These two lunatics. Murong Yu didn't continue to attack. Killing these people was really meaningless. Moreover, with Yu Mengqing, an out-of-body stage expert, it would be difficult for these Polar Light sect's disciples to escape. Therefore, Murong Yu began to plunder the Polar Light sect. However, what disappointed him was that even after he dug 3 feet into the ground of the entire Polar Light sect, he only found 10 million recovery pills. 10 million recovery pills. To others, it might be a huge number. However, to Murong Yu, it was somewhat disdainful. After all, the recovery pills he plundered from the shops in Upper Qingsheng were no less than a few dozen trillion. In addition to the recovery pills that were originally in the Hichu Luoshu world, it could be said that now, only those that were measured in trillions could catch his eye. Of course, those that were measured in hundreds of millions were still acceptable. After searching the storage bags of several dead elders, Murong Yu finally found the scene where the Polar Light sect's sect master was killed. However, to Murong Yu's disappointment, he couldn't find a storage bag of the Polar Light sect's sect master. He didn't know if he was also killed by the Skyquake arrow. When Yu Mengqing and Zhang Ao, who were covered in the smell of blood, returned from chasing the Polar Light sect's disciples, Murong Yu had already crossed his legs and waited for them to return on a high mountain near the Polar Light sect. He glanced at Yu Mengqing, this crazy girl. This girl was really crazy. She killed people like flies. She seemed to be even more bloodthirsty than him. He didn't know if it was inherited. Murong Yu heard that the current Xianyue sect master was also a female killer when she was young. Murong Yu stood up, patted his butt, and flicked out his flying sword. Then, he jumped up and said, "All right, let's go to the Xianyue sect." Chapter 134. Wait, we haven't plundered the Aurora sect yet. Yu Mengqing immediately stopped Murong Yu. Murong Yu slapped his head and said, "I forgot." With that, he pointed at Yu Mengqing. A purple light shot out from Yu Mengqing's body and turned into a stream of light that entered Murong Yu's body. Yu Mengqing regretted it. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have said it. That was an immortal weapon. After seeing the powerful defensive power of the purple ribbon immortal robe, Yu Mengqing had completely fallen in love with this immortal weapon. However, no matter what, Murong Yu couldn't give the purple ribbon immortal robe to Yu Mengqing. This crazy girl, as the precious daughter of the Xianyue sect master, he didn't believe that she didn't have one or two treasures on her. After keeping the purple ribbon immortal robe, 2 storage bags appeared in Murong Yu's hand. Then he flicked his hand and threw the 2 storage bags to Yu Mengqing and Zhang Ao. The 2 of them took the storage pouch and immediately saw the number of rejuvenation pills inside. 10 million. Only 10 million? It was the same number, but different people had different reactions. Zhang Ao's face was filled with shock, while Yu Mengqing looked at Murong Yu with dissatisfaction. There are only 30 to 40 million recovery pills in total. 10 million each is just right. It's not too much for me to take 20 million, right? Murong Yu chuckled. That's too much, Zhang Ao said with some unease. It's not much. Although the Aurora sect has been trampled, your blood feud has been avenged. Consider these medicinal pills your compensation. With these medicinal pills, you'll be able to cultivate to a certain realm, said Murong Yu. Basically, Murong Yu had already ignored the dissatisfied Yu Mengqing. This crazy girl, even if he gave her 100 million recovery pills, she would still have the same reaction. Senior, I have a request, I wonder. Zhang Ao hesitated for a moment and looked at Murong Yu. Speak. Murong Yu waved his hand. I want to follow you, Zhang Ao said firmly. Although Yu Mengqing's strength seemed to be stronger than Murong Yu, Zhang Ao still chose Murong Yu. Although he didn't know Murong Yu's identity, he instinctively felt that as long as he followed Murong Yu, his future would be limitless. Reason: Murong Yu didn't reveal any special expression. He just looked at Zhang Ao and said faintly, I want to become stronger. I want to stand out. I don't want to continue being a powerhouse. And I know that as long as I follow Senior Murong Yu, I can change everything. Zhang Ao blurted out without hesitation. In fact, this was exactly what he was thinking. With Murong Yu's strength, endless treasures, and forthright personality, as long as he followed him, there would definitely be a lot of treasures in the future. With the support of magic treasures and origin recovery pills, he would become even stronger in the future. It was only a matter of time before he would stand out. You have a spirit weapon and 10 million origin recovery pills. As long as you're given time, you will eventually become stronger. Murong Yu said faintly. Zhang Ao shook his head. This is not the same. Even if I become stronger in the future, I will only be an ordinary cultivator. In the cultivation world, I am simply unremarkable. However, if I follow you, I believe that the future will be very exciting. And I am absolutely loyal to Senior. Even if I have to climb a mountain of swords or plunge into a pot of boiling oil, I will not frown. I asked Senior to allow me to follow you. Good boy. I'm a little proud of what you said. Murong Yu's face revealed a smile as he patted Zhang Ao's shoulder. Zhang Ao was suddenly overjoyed. Senior, do you agree? Murong Yu shook his head. Seeing Zhang Ao's disappointment, Murong Yu continued. My reputation in the cultivation world isn't good. In the future, I might become a great villain. Furthermore, I have a lot of enemies. Right now, 2 of the top 10 sects in the cultivation world are hunting me down. If you follow me, perhaps you will be as good as you imagine. Perhaps you will lose your life tomorrow. But if you follow me, I will not treat you unfairly. Magic weapons, origin recovery pills, I will provide you with as many as you want. Think about it carefully. Senior, I have already decided. I will only follow you for the rest of my life. I will not regret it. Zhang Ao looked at Murong Yu with a resolute expression. Good. Murong Yu's face revealed a brilliant smile. In fact, he had already taken a fancy to Zhang Ao. Without anyone's guidance, he had relied on a fortuitous encounter to cultivate to the revolving reflection stage. His aptitude and comprehension were absolutely not bad. Moreover, this guy was also a vicious and merciless person. Murong Yu needed this kind of talent. This guy was definitely a talent. Over the past few days, Murong Yu had been observing him. Even if Zhang Ao did not speak, he was prepared to absorb him to his side. But he did not think that Zhang Ao would speak first. Just like this, Zhang Ao became Murong Yu's #1 subordinate. He would also be Murong Yu's general-level talent in the future. In the future, he would follow Murong Yu to traverse the world and laugh proudly at the heavens. Zhang Ao, the cultivation method you practice is too trashy. Wait for me to think about it. Then I will give you a high-level cultivation method. Also, try not to show your flying sword in front of others. For the time being, use this high-level magic weapon. While speaking, Murong Yu threw 2 flying swords to Zhang Ao. 1 high-level magic weapon, 1 middle-level magic weapon. Zhang Ao took them and quickly thanked him. Thank you, senior. Murong Yu frowned. Don't call me senior. Maybe you are older than me. Murong Yu muttered to himself. In the future, he would definitely establish his own power. But it would definitely not be a sect nor a family. It would be a kind of organization. Then, as the leader of the organization, how should he address him? You can call me leader in the future. Murong Yu pondered for a moment, then said, Yes, leader. Zhang Ao quickly changed his words. Okay, let's go to the Xianyue sect. After saying that, he flicked out his flying sword and flew away. Then, Yu Mengqing and Zhang Ao followed closely behind. Big hooligan, you lie to one person just like that. Yu Mengqing caught up and said with some jealousy. Murong Yu smiled. How did I lie? I never lie to anyone. What I said to Zhang Ao is true. Girl. Murong Yu turned to look at Yu Mengqing and said with a smile, Although you are the precious daughter of the Xianyue sect's sect master, I think you are even worse than Zhang Ao. Why don't you come and join me? Yu Mengqing rolled her eyes at Murong Yu. She was the young sect master of the Xianyue sect, one of the top 10 sections. How could she be with Murong Yu? What kind of scandal was this? I have enough magic treasures and pills, Murong Yu said with a smile. However, Murong Yu's words made Yu Mengqing a little tempted. This guy had an endless number of magic treasures, and even more pills than the Xianyue sect. Moreover, other than being a little stingy in terms of magic treasures, this guy was very generous in other aspects. If she followed him, she would definitely not be at a disadvantage. I'll think about it, Yu Mengqing suddenly said. Murong Yu was stunned. He was only joking. Yu Mengqing couldn't have taken it seriously, right? However, if Yu Mengqing really followed him, then the Xianyue sect would not be his enemy in the future. Yes, there were still benefits. After 7 or 8 days, they finally arrived at the Xianyue sect. At this time, the day of the opening of the Extreme Heaven Realm was approaching. There were about 10 days left. Xianyue sect, one of the top 10 sects in the cultivation world. This sect was a little different because the entire sect was mostly female. Among them, the upper echelons of a Xianyue sect, such as the elders and sect master, had always been held by women. As for the male disciples in the sect, although they lived among the flowers, they only did heavy work and did not have much status. After returning to the Xianyue sect, Yu Mengqing seemed to have become another person. She was no longer crazy and seemed to have turned back into a lady. This was her image in the Xianyue sect. Murong Yu sighed in his heart. Women were so fickle. Senior sister, little senior sister, you're finally back. The sect master has been very worried about you. He has been outside inquiring about you for the past few months and only came back a few days ago. As soon as she entered the Xianyue sect, many disciples of the Xianyue sect greeted Yu Mengqing. Yu Mengqing responded politely with a smile on her face. As for Murong Yu and Zhang Ao, they were completely ignored by these disciples of the Xianyue sect, because these two guys were at the fusion stage and revolving reflection stage. In the Xianyue sect, they could only be the lowest level cultivators and did not attract attention at all. Of course, this was also related to their appearance. These two guys both looked ordinary, especially Murong Yu. He was originally considered delicate and pretty, but now that he wore a mask, he looked extremely ordinary. Listening to everyone's words, especially her mother who was very worried about her, Yu Mengqing suddenly became anxious. After hurriedly calling a female disciple and giving a few instructions, she left Murong Yu and Zhang Ao and flew away. This made Murong Yu and Zhang Ao speechless. Fortunately, although this girl was crazy, she still did things properly and let a female disciple lead the way for them. Otherwise, Murong Yu and Zhang Ao would definitely get lost. This was the Xianyue sect. There were women everywhere. Murong Yu did not dare to barge in. If there was any misunderstanding, it would be a tragedy. However, the woman that Yu Mengqing casually called over just looked at Murong Yu and Zhang Ao indifferently, then said coldly, "Follow me." After saying that, she did not care about Murong Yu and Zhang Ao and flew away first. It must be the menopause. Murong Yu muttered to himself as he followed the female disciple around. Finally, they arrived at the top of a mountain. "You guys wait here." After bringing Murong Yu and Zhang Ao to a place that looked like a garden, the woman left directly. What kind of attitude is this? Zhang Ao was also dissatisfied. After all, they were all friends of the young sect master. Now that they came to the Xinhua sect as guests, this was the treatment? Don't be impatient. Murong Yu shrugged indifferently. In fact, he found that the scenery in the distance from this high peak was not bad. It should be said that this peak should be the highest peak in the Xinhua sect. Standing here, as long as one's eyesight was good enough, one could basically have a bird's-eye view of the entire Xinhua sect. Time slowly passed, and in the end, Murong Yu was annoyed. Unknowingly, Murong Yu lay down on a huge rock, narrowed his eyes, and finally fell asleep. Chapter 135. On the other hand, Zhang Ao stood by Murong Yu's side meticulously, protecting him. Yes, it was indeed much more convenient to have subordinates. Even if you were sleeping, there would be someone keeping watch for you. You would not be afraid of being ambushed. Murong Yu. Just as Murong Yu was in a daze, he suddenly heard someone calling him. Instantly, he woke up with a start. He rubbed his eyes and looked around. "Who's calling me?" It's dark." When Murong Yu woke up, he immediately realized that the sky was dark. Then he saw the two people who were smiling at him not far away. "Yu Mengqing, you actually left us here for half a day. I'm a guest of the Xinhua sect after all." When he saw Yu Mengqing, Murong Yu did not care if the person beside her was his mother, the Xinhua sect leader, and immediately muttered in dissatisfaction. In fact, Murong Yu confirmed the identity of the girl beside Yu Mengqing with one glance. After all, who else could it be other than the Xinhua sect leader, Yu Vexu, who else looked 60% to 70% similar to Yu Mengqing, but was also more mature and older than her. Hearing this, Yu Mengqing instantly blushed with shame. However, she was also a little angry in her heart. She had clearly asked the female disciple to arrange for Murong Yu and Zhang Ao, but she did not expect them to be arranged here. "Please don't take offense. It's our Xinhua sect's fault." The Xinhua sect leader stepped forward and said apologetically to Murong Yu and Zhang Ao. Murong Yu's stomach full of anger was extinguished just like that. The sect leader of the 10 great sects actually apologized to him. He really had a lot of face. Since they gave him face, he had to give them face too, right? Xinhua sect in the main hall. Yu Vexiu, Yu Mengqing, Murong Yu, and Zhang Ao sat down as the host and guest. Looking at Murong Yu, who was sitting below, Yu Vexiu nodded slightly. She had long heard of Murong Yu's name. Outside the ancient spring city, he killed a unity body elder of the Yuanshu sect and more than 1,000 cultivators from other sections. For the first time, this incident made Murong Yu famous in the cultivation world. However, what really made the world recognize Murong Yu was the Zhushenzong incident after the ancient Spring City incident. A great battle in Zhushenzong with a cultivation of revolving reflection stage. In that battle, Murong Yu killed several transcending tribulation cultivators. Even Zhushenzong's immortal weapon was shattered by Murong Yu's golden skeleton. Even sect master Zhushenzong, who possessed 2 immortal items, was injured. In the end, a first step immortal took action, but Murong Yu still managed to escape from Zhushenzong, and his whereabouts were unknown. Although Murong Yu was so strong because of the golden skeleton, that was also a part of his strength. Therefore, since that incident, Murong Yu's fierce reputation really spread throughout the cultivation world. After that incident, Zhushenzong and Yuanshu sects people were all looking for Murong Yu. Just when everyone thought that Murong Yu had hidden away to cultivate, Murong Yu was still swaggering in the cultivation world. Yu Mengqing also told Yulvexiu about what happened after going to Qingqing. Of course, this was under the condition that Murong Yu agreed. Murong Yu was actually taking a risk by doing this. He was gambling on his friendship with Yu Mengqing and Yulvexiu's character. Now, it seemed that Murong Yu's gamble was right. After Yulvexiu knew his identity, there was nothing strange. She probably wouldn't snatch Murong Yu's cultivation methods and magic treasures. Regarding Mengqing, I have to thank you. Otherwise, I don't know if we would have the chance to meet again. The first thing Yulvexiu did was to thank Murong Yu. Murong Yu smiled and said, "It's nothing. The black-clothed men are actually not that cruel. They won't hurt the innocent." At this point, Yu Mengqing, who was next to Yulvexiu, couldn't help but glare fiercely at Murong Yu. This guy had fought with the black-clothed men in Upper Qingqing and even seriously injured the city lord of Upper Qingqing. This was completely bullshit. After Yu Mengqing saw Yulvexiu, she knew the whole story. Murong Yu was a little embarrassed. Back then, in order to deter those people, he made up some nonsense. Who knew that he would change his mind and let Yu Mengqing out? This was a little unexpected. As for the matter of you entering the extreme heaven realm, there's no problem. At that time, you can go with the people of our Xinhua sect. Yulvexiu said. This matter was not a problem for her at all. It was just adding one more person. Murong Yu pointed to Zhang Ao and said, "I'm afraid, sect master, you will have to give an extra spot. This guy has to go in too." "No problem." Yulvexiu immediately agreed. As for Zhang Ao, he didn't have any objections. Anyway, he had already decided to follow Murong Yu. He would do whatever Murong Yu asked him to do. Next, after everyone chatted for a while, Murong Yu took Zhang Ao and left to rest. He left the space for the mother and daughter. After Murong Yu and Zhang Ao left, Yulvexiu and her daughter did not leave. At this moment, Yu Mengqing looked at Yulvexiu and asked with a smile, "Mother, I didn't lie to you. That hooligan is not bad." Yulvexiu nodded. She had already understood Murong Yu through Yu Mengqing. After interacting with him for a while, she could roughly tell what kind of person Murong Yu was. "Mengqing, after you came back, I realized that you've changed. After this extreme heaven realm, you should still go out and train." Yulvexiu looked at Yu Mengqing and smiled dotingly. Before this, although Yu Mengqing had the strength of an out-of-body stage, she rarely went out to train. She didn't have a deep understanding of this cultivation world. The flowers in the greenhouse couldn't withstand the brilliance of the storm. If she wanted to grow, she had to go out and train. Only by seeing more and experiencing more would she become mature. After Yu Mengqing returned this time, Yulvexiu realized that Yu Mengqing had become more mature than before. She was no longer the little girl who didn't know anything. "How did I change? I'm still me. I haven't changed." Yu Mengqing looked at her mother with a puzzled expression and said with some confusion, "Since you came back, you've been talking about Murong Yu. Have you fallen in love with him?" Yulvexiu said with a smile. Yu Mengqing was startled. Her face suddenly flashed with a touch of blush, and she suddenly became bashful. The scene from back then involuntarily flashed across her eyes. The scene of Murong Yu's hooligan hands covering her breasts. How could I possibly like that hooligan? He's not handsome and has a lot of enemies. Humph, I won't like him. Yu Mengqing lowered her head. Her hands kneaded the corner of her clothes as she said bashfully. When talking about this kind of thing with the elders, she always felt very embarrassed. "Murong Yu is a good person. If it's possible, I won't stop you," Yulvexiu said with a faint smile. Whether it was Murong Yu's strength, his endless magic treasures, the golden skeleton, or even his unclear relationship with the black-clothed man, it all made Yulvexiu more and more curious about Murong Yu. From these aspects, she could see that Murong Yu's future achievements would definitely not be low. If Yu Mengqing really fell in love with Murong Yu, it seemed that it was also a kind of fate. "Anyway, I won't like him. It's late. I won't talk to you anymore. I'm going to rest." Yu Mengqing left this sentence and then flew out of the hall as if she was escaping. Looking at Yu Mengqing's quickly disappearing figure, Yu Mengqing fell into deep thought. 3 days later, Murong Yu and the others set off. A group of hundreds of people flew towards the extreme sky city in a mighty manner. Looking at the 500 people behind him, Murong Yu was a little speechless. These were all Mystic Moon Sect disciples who wanted to enter the Extreme Sky realm to train. Sect Master Yu, there are actually so many people from the Mystic Moon Sect who want to enter the Extreme Sky realm to train? How big is the Extreme Sky realm? Murong Yu approached Ulvexiu and asked puzzledly. Hee. Murong Yu, you also want to go to the Extreme Sky realm to train? Do you want Big Sister to protect you? Before Ulvexiu could speak, a woman flying beside her said with a smile. This was a woman about 20 years old. Her actual age was unknown, but she looked like she was about 20 years old. Her name was Young Man, and she was one of Yu Ulvexiu's disciples. Even Yu Mengqing had to call her senior sister. During these 3 days in the Mystic Moon Sect, Murong Yu walked around the Mystic Moon Sect. Perhaps it was because Murong Yu's body always emitted a faint fragrance that made these women have a good impression of him. Or perhaps it was because Murong Yu is unusually generous. He casually gave out a handful of pills without any heartache. In just 3 days, he had become familiar with many female disciples of the Mystic Moon Sect, especially the disciples around Yu Ulvexiu. His relationship with them was even better. Young Man was one of them. Of course, little brother's strength is low. Now that I've entered the Extreme Sky realm, of course I need Senior Sister Yang's protection. But Senior Sister Yang, aren't you in the out-of-body stage? Can you enter the Extreme Sky realm? Murong Yu looked at Young Man in confusion. The Extreme Sky realm restricted cultivators with too high a stage from entering. Out-of-body stage, cultivators couldn't enter. Young Man just smiled. When the time comes, you can follow me. Big Sister will protect you well. Senior Sister Yang, don't be fooled by this hooligan. That guy has so many tricks up his sleeve. Who can hurt him? Beside Young Man, Yu Mengqing looked at Murong Yu with disdain. The other 2 beautiful female disciples beside Yu Ulvexiu couldn't help but cover their mouths and chuckle. Junior brother Murong. At this time, another woman called Sima Ryu spoke. She was also one of the female disciples who was more familiar with Murong Yu. She said, the Extreme Sky realm is a real small world. No one in the cultivation world knows how big it is, because it's really too big. Moreover, there are many dangers in the depths. In addition, the powerhouses of the cultivation world can't go in, so what we know is basically only the periphery of the Extreme Sky realm. Don't think that 500 disciples of our Mystic Moon Sect are going to enter the Extreme Sky realm. It seems like a lot, but among the big sects, our Mystic Moon Sect has the least number of disciples. There are even thousands of people in the sect. Sima Ryu said. Murong Yu nodded, and he became more and more curious about the Extreme Sky realm. Moreover, no one could step into the depths of the Extreme Sky realm. This was definitely an unexplored place. He had a feeling that entering the Extreme Celestial realm this time would be a great harvest. Chapter 136. The Extreme Heaven realm opened once every 10 years and lasted for a year each time. During this time, the disciples of the various sects could search for all kinds of spiritual herbs, spiritual medicines, ruins, and even opportunities in the Extreme Heaven realm. Almost every time, there would be a sect that had an extremely shocking harvest inside. But every time, the casualties were huge. For example, the Mystic Moon Sect, where 500 people entered the Extreme Heaven realm, it was already considered good if 100 people came out after a year. Therefore, opportunities and dangers coexisted inside. Those who were lucky could not only keep their lives, but also have fortuitous encounters. Those who were unlucky would probably never come out after entering. But even so, there would be many people participating every time the Extreme Heaven realm opened. It was like a gamble. If one could have some fortuitous encounter inside, or find some precious spiritual herbs, then after coming out, their value would double. But often, most people could only enter and not come out. This was the cruelty of the cultivation world. If one did not work hard, they could only be mediocre for the rest of their lives. The Extreme Heaven City was not too far from the Mystic Moon Sect. Therefore, the people of the Mystic Moon Sect dared to go to the Extreme Heaven City before the Extreme Heaven realm opened. When Murong Yu and the others arrived at the extreme heaven city, they found that it was extremely lively these few days. The disciples of the various sects had all flocked to the extreme heaven city in these few days. The crowd that flocked to the extreme heaven city had long been booming business, especially the restaurants and inns in the extreme heaven city. They were extremely popular. Even before entering the extreme sky city, they saw many tents outside the extreme sky city. They even saw many cultivators sitting cross-legged in the open space outside the city or in the mountains. These were all cultivators from the various sects who came to participate in the extreme heaven realm trial. Although the extreme heaven city was huge, it could not accommodate so many cultivators from the various sections. Therefore, they could only temporarily stay outside the city and wait for the opening of the extreme heaven realm. Fortunately, a large sect like the Mystic Moon sect also had their own property in the extreme heaven city. Although it was a little crowded for hundreds of people, they could barely stay. At least they did not have to sleep on the streets. The next day was the opening day of the extreme heaven realm. Arriving outside the extreme heaven city, Ulvexiu left the property of the Mystic Moon sect. She should be meeting with the various sect leaders in a room within the Xianyue sect's property. Murongyu, Yu Mengqing, Yang Man, Sima Ruyu, and a female cultivator called Pei Peiyu were all gathered in Yu Mengqing's room. Murongyu, on the other hand, had a look of surprise and doubt on his face. You are all out-of-body stage cultivators. But you said you're going to enter the extreme heaven realm tomorrow? I don't understand. Didn't they say that out-of-body stage cultivators can't enter the extreme celestial realm? Murongyu said hesitantly. These women, especially Yang Man and Pei Peiyu, kept talking about how they would protect Murongyu while they were inside. It seemed that these few days, Murongyu's yuan rejuvenation pills had not gone to waste. Regardless of whether these three women really wanted to protect Murongyu, this was enough. Didn't they say that relationships needed to be nurtured? As they cultivated, they would naturally develop feelings for each other. Of course, this kind of feeling was not between a man and a woman. Only Yu Mengqing had a disdainful expression. These three women were really... Yu Mengqing didn't know how to describe them. In any case, they'd know once they witnessed Murongyu's strength. Pei Peiyu looked at Murongyu in surprise and said, Junior brother Murong, don't you know that there's a god art called seal power in the cultivation world? Seal power? Murongyu was surprised. You're saying that you can seal your power and stage before entering the extreme heaven realm? Is this possible? Extreme heaven realm cultivators couldn't enter higher stage. Murongyu of course knew that power and stage could be sealed, but he thought that he couldn't enter. After all, the extreme heaven realm had that kind of rule. Of course, but only out-of-body stage cultivators can enter. Severed spirit stage experts can't enter even if they seal their power to fusion stage. Young Man said with a smile. So, junior brother Murongyu, big sister will protect you when the time comes. Sima Ryu said with a smile. Murongyu was shocked at first. He didn't think that he could enter the extreme heaven realm after sealing his cultivation. If that was the case, wouldn't half-immortal stage people be able to enter after sealing their power? In that case, even if he entered the extreme heaven realm, it wouldn't be easy. It was very likely that he would encounter half-immortal stage existences like Zhuang Ningguang and Sun Pingxi. But fortunately, severed spirit stage people couldn't enter. Then he had nothing to fear. Even if he didn't use the golden skeleton, out-of-body stage cultivators couldn't do anything. If he used all his means, then even out-of-body stage cultivators could be killed by Murongyu. Aurora Sect's sect master and Elder Huarong were examples. After relaxing, Murongyu smiled again. He looked at the three women and said, Senior sisters, you've all entered the extreme celestial realm before. Can you tell me what it's like inside? Let's put it this way, it's a huge world inside. Besides demon beasts and cultivators from our sects, there are no other cultivators. And in the extreme heaven realm, there are all kinds of extremely old spirit herbs and spirit medicines. Moreover, there are occasionally ruins in the extreme heaven realm. Ruins? Aren't there no cultivators in the extreme heaven realm? Where did the ruins come from? I don't know the details, but every year there will be immortal equipment in the ruins. And this is the reason why the sects are crazy. Immortal equipment. Moronyu was startled. There were immortal equipment inside. Could it be that the extreme heaven realm was related to the immortal realm? Or was the extreme heaven realm created by immortals? Of course, this suspicion wasn't just limited to Moronyu. There were immortal equipment inside, and it wasn't just one or two. If it wasn't related to immortals or the immortal realm, then how could it be explained? The next day, the extreme heaven realm opened. The entrance of the extreme heaven realm was actually not in the extreme heaven city. It was in the mountains more than 10 miles away from the extreme heaven city. Outside the entrance of the extreme heaven realm was a huge square. It was about 10 miles in size. When Moronyu arrived here, he found that it was very crowded. But it was obvious that there was a large open space in front of the entrance of the extreme heaven realm. Ulvexiu led the people of the Mystic Moon sect towards the open space. Obviously, this was a place reserved for the Mystic Moon sect. And near the open space, there were 9 other teams standing. Moronyu glanced over and found familiar people in 2 of the teams. Actually, they weren't familiar people. Moronyu was very familiar with their clothes. They were Zushinzong and the disciples of the Yuansu sect. Other than these 2 big sects, there were 7 other teams standing side by side with them. Obviously, they were 9 of the 10 big sections. After the 10 big sects, there were still queues. Although these weren't the 10 big sects, they weren't weak either. Otherwise, they definitely wouldn't be so close to the front. And among these queues, Moronyu saw people from the Bada Chamber of Commerce and the World Auction House. From the looks of it, the temptation of the extreme heaven realm to these people was not shallow. It was at this moment that Moronyu discovered that the profound Moon sect, which he'd originally thought to have more members, was actually far too few compared to the other 10 great sections. In fact, some of the disciples from the medium-sized sects were much more than the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect. The extreme heaven realm hadn't opened yet. Moronyu was like a crane in a flock of chickens as he stood in the queue. In the entire Mystic Moon sect, other than him and Zhang Ao, there was no third man. One could imagine what kind of gazes the people around them were using to look at them. Every male disciple felt that Moronyu and Zhang Ao's luck with women was not bad. The 2 men lingered in front of hundreds of beautiful women. This was not a treatment that anyone could have. Feeling the jealous and envious gazes of the people around him, Zhang Ao, who was facing such a big scene for the first time, felt a little uneasy. On the other hand, Moronyu only glanced at the 10 big sects indifferently. To him, this kind of attention was something he was already used to. Moreover, he wasn't in the appearance of Moronyu now. He was just an ordinary young man that no one knew. Morongyu's gaze swept across the hidden fairy valley. Suddenly, his expression shook and his eyes lit up. Following that, he walked out of the Mystic Moon sect's queue and slowly walked towards the hidden fairy valley. Hi, brothers and sisters. I'm a disciple of the Mystic Moon sect. Moronyu walked to the front of the hidden fairy valley and enthusiastically greeted the disciples of the hidden fairy valley. However, it was obvious that the people of the hidden fairy valley only looked at him strangely. Occasionally, there were people who responded to him. Moronyu didn't mind. He wasn't here to strike up a conversation with these people. His goal was at the back of the hidden fairy valley. Excuse me. Moronyu directly walked into the crowd of the hidden fairy valley. He shouted and walked toward the back of the hidden fairy valley. Seeing Moronyu's actions, the Mystic Moon sect's disciples, especially the few girls who were familiar with Moronyu, were all shocked. They looked at Moronyu and didn't know what he was going to do. The disciples of the hidden fairy valley also looked at Moronyu in shock. They didn't know what he was going to do. However, very quickly, the faces of the disciples of the hidden fairy valley, especially the male disciples, darkened. This was because they finally realized what Moronyu was going to do. Behind the disciples of the hidden fairy valley, the newly promoted saintess of the hidden fairy valley, Zhao Jiqing, was here. Moronyu pushed away the obstruction of the disciples of the hidden fairy valley and went straight to Zhao Jiqing. After realizing Murong Yu's intentions, the disciples of the Hidden Fairy Valley couldn't help but curse in their hearts. This bastard, there are clearly hundreds of girls behind him, but he still wants to strike up a conversation with the saintess. Other than cursing Murong Yu, they were also quite proud. Murong Yu's actions naturally showed how beautiful their saintess was. Along the way, there were countless young talents who had tried to strike up a conversation with the saintess. However, the results were all tragic. At the same time as they were angry, the disciples of the Hidden Fairy Valley looked at Murong Yu with amusement. They wanted to see how Murong Yu would hit his head and bleed. "Hey, beauties, how are you?" Murong Yu approached and waved at Zhao Jiqing and the others. Zhao Jiqing, and even the girls beside Zhao Jiqing, didn't even look at Murong Yu. Obviously, they couldn't be bothered with Murong Yu. Chapter 137. Although these people were all from Qingxian Peak and were very familiar with Murong Yu, he was not wearing his original appearance. However, Murong Yu wasn't in his original appearance. He was wearing a mask, so they assumed that he was just another bored person who had come to strike up a conversation. "Hi, beautiful ladies, long time no see." Murong Yu approached them with a smile. "Get lost." The red-clothed woman, Huawei, was still as hot-tempered as ever. She directly shouted at Murong Yu. Murong Yu's face darkened immediately. He muttered in his heart, "This girl is still hot-tempered. She'll be at a disadvantage in the future." However, as an adult, Murong Yu ignored Huawei's words. After all, she didn't know that he was Murong Yu. Moreover, the reaction of Huawei and the others was exactly what Murong Yu wanted to see. Why? By doing so, they were directly protecting Zhao Jiqing. Those who had designs on Zhao Jiqing couldn't get close. "Jiqing, it's me." Murong Yu had no choice but to stop and send a voice transmission to Zhao Jiqing. Zhao Jiqing didn't even look at Murong Yu, but she suddenly heard Murong Yu's voice transmission. This caused her to be taken aback. She looked over and happened to see the ordinary-looking young man nodding and smiling at her not far away. Zhao Jiqing felt strange. She put on her clothes and said, "Murong Yu, is that you?" Murong Yu grinned. "That's right. Can't you say a few words?" "Of course, don't expose my identity." Just when Huawei wanted to chase Murong Yu away, Zhao Jiqing suddenly spoke. "Let him come over." Hearing this, the people around Zhao Jiqing couldn't help but be shocked. This was the first time they saw Zhao Jiqing treat a man like this. Immediately, everyone could not help but carefully size up Murong Yu. However, the more he looked, the more he felt that Murong Yu was really ordinary, and his strength was really ordinary. He was simply useless. Of course, when the girls were carefully sizing up Murong Yu, they immediately noticed a faint fragrance coming from Murong Yu's body. Could it be that she's cross-dressing? All the girls looked at Murong Yu with black lines on their faces. Murong Yu had already passed through the crowd and arrived at Zhao Jiqing's side. "Hi, beautiful saintess." Murong Yu greeted Zhao Jiqing with a bright smile. In fact, he had already sent a voice transmission to Zhao Jiqing. "So many people from Qingxian Peak came this time?" Murong Yu asked with a frown. Qingxian Peak originally had 13 girls, and now there were already 6 of them. In addition to a few disciples who joined Qingxian Peak later, Qingxian Peak actually had more than 10 people this time. Most of them had the strength of Fusion Stage and Whirlpool Stage. In the extreme celestial realm, they could only be abused and killed like vegetables. Qingxian Peak was just established not long ago and has no resources. This is the best opportunity to enter the extreme heavenly realm, Zhao Jiqing said with a voice transmission. Murong Yu shook his head. "Do you know how dangerous it is inside? And there are even many out-of-body stage cultivators from the major sects going in together?" Zhao Jiqing nodded. Of course she knew all this, but she was also helpless. Although they had Murong Yu's various resources to support them, it was still not enough. Most importantly, Zhao Jiqing did not want Murong Yu to fight for all this. If Qingxian Peak wanted to develop, it could not only rely on Murong-yu alone. She had to contribute her own strength. After all, Murong-yu's strength was limited. In that case, after entering the extreme heavenly realm, come with me. At least there's strength in numbers. Murong-yu glanced at Zhao Jiqing and found that her strength was already in the late fusion stage. This speed of improvement made Murong-yu feel ashamed. Zhao Jiqing nodded, and then Murong-yu smiled and left. When he passed by the Hidden Fairy Valley's disciples, the Hidden Fairy Valley's disciples all looked at Murong-yu with envy. How could this incomparably ordinary boy get close to the saintess? Even his fellow disciples, they could not get close to her. Everyone, your saintess is really approachable and easy to get along with. Murong-yu waved and smiled at the Hidden Fairy Valley's disciples, but made them want to be pressed to the ground and then ruthlessly kicked a few times. Big gangster, why are you going to the Hidden Fairy Valley? That's the Hidden Fairy Valley's new saintess. I didn't expect her to enter the extreme heavenly realm. After returning to the Mystic Moon sex group, Yu Mengqing immediately came over and said to Murong-yu with some jealousy, "Heaven's secrets cannot be revealed." Murong-yu grinned. Yu Mengqing couldn't help but want to slap Murong-yu's smiling face. This guy was simply too hateful. However, what exactly did he say to the Hidden Fairy Valley saintess? Not only was Yu Mengqing puzzled, but even Huawei and the rest were also puzzled. This was because Murong-yu had just set up a soundproof restriction outside of them, and Murong-yu and Huawei were talking through telepathy. Whoosh! At this moment, at the end of the square, a glaring white light suddenly bloomed from the side of the mountain. The white light rushed into the sky and attracted everyone's attention. However, the glaring divine light was too dazzling, and everyone could not help but squint their eyes slightly. When they opened their eyes again, the white light had already disappeared. A huge door surrounded by white light was floating in the void. The entrance to the extreme heavenly realm had finally opened. As long as they passed through this portal, they would be able to enter the extreme heavenly realm. And this door would remain open until today, 1 year later. Of course, although the portal was still there, from tomorrow onwards, they could only leave and not enter. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. After the portal to the extreme heavenly realm opened, the people from the Tianyin sect who were in front of the square and closest to the entrance soared into the sky and rushed into the portal with their flying swords. At this moment, Murong-yu realized that the auras of Yu Mengqing, Young Man, and the rest beside him had weakened a lot. Then, he saw that their strength was suppressed to the solitary spirit stage. Murong-yu had the strength of 100 Pan Liang, which was far stronger than ordinary solitary spirit stage cultivators. Of course, he could see through the solitary spirit stage. Whoosh, 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 the 10 great sects rushed in one after another, and soon it was the Mystic Moon sect's turn. Murong-yu followed Yu Mengqing and the others and flew into the portal. A hazy white light shrouded Murong-yu's body, as if it was spying on him. Murong-yu knew that this was the entrance to the extreme heavenly realm, checking everyone's cultivation. As long as one's strength was too high, the extreme heavenly realm would refuse to enter. After the white light passed, Murong-yu felt a huge pulling force shrouding his body. Before he could react, his whole body had been pulled into the entrance. After a slight dizziness, Murong-yu stood on the ground again. However, just as he stepped on the ground, he felt a dangerous aura slashing from behind him. Someone was ambushing him. Murong-yu's face narrowed slightly, and his big hand grabbed the void. The phoenix spear that he had placed in his dantian for a long time was already in his hand. Then, Murong-yu held the spear and swept it backward. Boom! A black spear light burst out, shattering heaven and earth. It traversed heaven and earth, carrying an incomparably terrifying murderous aura as it rushed out. After a series of screams, the few cultivators who ambushed Murong-yu from behind were instantly beaten into a bloody mist. At this moment, Murong-yu realized that there were already many corpses lying on the ground near the entrance. Obviously, These cultivators from the 10 great sects had started a massacre after entering the extreme heavenly realm. They killed and robbed. In addition to the dangers inside the extreme heavenly realm, there were more cultivators from various sections. Here, it was a massacre. Even sects that were on good terms with each other would kill each other. There were still many people near the entrance, but when they saw Murong Yu killing a few heartbeat stage cultivators with a single spear, the surrounding people were so scared that they retreated far away. At this moment, the people from a Mystic Moon sect flew in one after another. When they entered the Mystic Moon sect, many disciples nearby wanted to kill the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect, but they were rushed up by Murong Yu using the army formula, and then stabbed to death one by one with his spear. After knowing Murong Yu's identity and strength, no one dared to attack the people of the Mystic Moon sect. After Yu Mengqing and the others entered, Murong Yu called Zhang Ao and was about to leave. Junior brother Murong, you're leaving? You're not with us? Pei Pei Yu asked in surprise. In the extreme heavenly realm, people usually moved in groups. If they were alone, it was easy to be robbed and killed by others. Murong Yu smiled. I won't be with you. Although it's safer to follow you, it's less fun to adventure. So we'll leave first. If it's fate, we'll meet again. As he spoke, Murong Yu had already soared into the sky with Zhang Ao and flew into the distance. However, before leaving, Murong Yu flicked a jade slip to Yu Mengqing. Girl, if there's anything, remember to crush the jade slip. I'll know immediately. Yu Mengqing's heart moved, although she wanted to be with Murong Yu. But looking at the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect, she shook her head. On the other side, Zhao Jiqing, who had entered the extreme heavenly realm before the Mystic Moon sect, led the people of Qingxian Peak and left the Hidden Fairy Valley team. Although it was safe to be with them, they might not get anything in the end. After all, there were too many people, and the chances of getting anything were too slim. Moreover, she had to meet up with Murong Yu. Senior sister, which direction are we going? It was the first time that the girls had entered the extreme heavenly realm. They were all chattering and looking around excitedly. However, they did not know that danger was gradually approaching them. Boom! A sword light appeared out of thin air in the distance. Then it slashed through hundreds of millions of space-time at lightning speed and slashed fiercely on Zhao Jiqing, who was walking in front. Senior sister. Seeing this scene, Huawei and the others immediately exclaimed. Just when they thought that Zhao Jiqing would suffer misfortune, a vast aura burst out from Zhao Jiqing's body. An intense but not dazzling white light soared into the sky and instantly swept in all directions, enveloping Huawei and the others. The moment it came into contact with the white light, the flying sword that was shooting over let out a loud, clanging sound and was actually bounced back. Chapter 138. The white light was like a shield that enveloped Zhao Jiqing, Huawei, and the rest, protecting them from the enemy's attack. Huawei and the rest in the white light quickly rushed forward, each of them revealing a concerned expression as they looked at Zhao Jiqing. Senior sister, are you all right? Zhao Jiqing shook her head and continued to look around with a frosty expression. Swish, swish, swish. At this moment, figures jumped out from the surrounding mountains one after another. These people were all wearing the same uniform. It seemed like they were all from the same sect. Furthermore, unlike ordinary cultivators, when ordinary cultivators didn't use their flying swords, they would put their flying swords into storage spaces, such as storage pouches. However, these people all had long swords on their backs, and even the most ordinary flying swords emitted a cold, killing intent, as well as a soaring sword intent. There was only one sect in the entire cultivation world that carried such a sharp sword intent on their backs. Limitless Sword Sect. Limitless Sword Sect, just like their sect name, they were a group of people who lived for the sword. They did not use any other magic treasures, only the sword. The sword was the magic treasure, and the magic treasure was the sword. At the same time, they were good at becoming one with the sword was them, and they were the sword. Even if it was only a low-grade magic treasure, when used in their hands, the power was 3 times stronger than a cultivator of the same level. Therefore, among the top 10 sects, Limitless Sword Sect's battle power was stronger than the other sections. Moreover, most of the sword cultivators were stronger than cultivators of the same level, but fighting with them was also very painful. These people were all crazy. Each and every one of them did not care about their lives when fighting. It was because of this, in the cultivation world, there were people who would rather provoke other sects than provoke the Limitless Sword Sect. However, what Zhao Jiqing and the rest did not expect was that the moment they entered the extreme heaven realm, the people from Limitless Sword Sect began to ambush them. If not for the 8 trigrams immortal robe on Zhao Jiqing's body that sensed the strong killing intent and automatically protected its owner, Zhao Jiqing would have been killed long ago. Thinking about how she was almost killed by a sneak attack, even the calm, Zhao Jiqing couldn't help but feel furious. She coldly looked at the dozens of cultivators from the Limitless Sword Sect and coldly said, "Why did you ambush us?" TSK, Zhao Jiqing, the new saintess of the Hidden Fairy Valley. He wondered how the Hidden Fairy Valley would react if the saintess of the Hidden Fairy Valley died in the extreme heavenly realm. Pain? Regret? A young man walked out and sneered at Zhao Jiqing. Zhao Jiqing, the new saintess of the Hidden Fairy Valley. This matter had already spread throughout the cultivation world. She was only in the revolving reflection period, and she was already conferred the title of saintess. Why was that? It was obvious that Zhao Jiqing had great potential. The Hidden Fairy Valley had started to nurture her early on. This was a good thing for the Hidden Fairy Valley. Once Zhao Jiqing matured, the Hidden Fairy Valley would become even stronger. However, to the other sects, especially the other 10 great sects, it wasn't a good thing. The Hidden Fairy Valley was already vaguely the leader of the 10 great sections. If Zhao Jiqing matured, she would be able to suppress them. Therefore, after knowing that Zhao Jiqing would also enter the extreme celestial realm, the other sects also made a series of arrangements. One of the most important things was to make sure that Zhao Jiqing would not be able to leave the extreme celestial realm. The Limitless Sword Sect was only the first to make a move. Genius and Zhao Jiqing immediately reacted after hearing the words of the Limitless Sword Sect disciple. "Want to kill me? With just the 2 of you?" Zhao Jiqing sneered. Following that, her right hand grabbed the air. In the next moment, a long sword that emitted a terrifying aura appeared in her hand. Immortal equipment. It was one of the immortal equipment that Muronyu gave her. Kill. The young man seemed to be the leader of this group of Limitless Sword Sect disciples. With a cold snort, the dozens of Limitless Sword Sect disciples around him immediately roared and commanded their flying swords to attack Zhao Jiqing. Huawei and the rest were extremely angry. They all shouted and released their flying swords to fight against the Limitless Sword Sect disciples. But it was obvious that Huawei and the rest were not very strong. Furthermore, their enemy was a sword cultivator with stronger fighting power. Bang! 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 After the sounds of flying swords colliding, Huawei and the rest were immediately unable to hold on. Although their flying swords were not bad, they were all defeated after the first round and were sent flying back. Some of them had even suffered mental injuries because of this. But fortunately, Zhao Jiqing took out the 8 trigrams immortal robe. The light from the 8 trigrams immortal robe blocked the attacks of the Limitless Sword Sect disciples. Otherwise, Huawei and the rest would have been killed. Courting death, Zhao Jiqing's face was as cold as ice. She roared and poured her elemental energy into the immortal equipment in her hand. The immortal tier flying sword was instantly mobilized, erupting with an extremely terrifying sword light. Swoosh! Zhao Jiqing swept out her sword. A sword light slashed out fiercely, seemingly splitting the void into 2 halves as it ruthlessly slashed towards the surrounding disciples of the Limitless Sword Sect. Puff! 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 The huge sword light shot out like lightning and slashed at the flying swords of the Limitless Sword sect disciples. In front of the immortal equipment, even if they were powerful sword cultivators, even if their flying swords were especially strong, they were not a match for the immortal equipment. As if they were made of tofu, wherever the sword light from the immortal equipment passed, the flying swords would be split into two. Sword cultivators were different from ordinary cultivators. When ordinary cultivators' magic treasures were damaged, their mental state would be damaged. And sword cultivators would refine their flying swords into their natal magic treasures. Therefore, when their flying swords were destroyed, their mental state would be even more damaged. Immediately, those disciples who had their flying swords destroyed all spat out blood. Puff, wherever the sword light passed, a bloody mist would soar into the sky. The cultivators of the Limitless Sword sect did not even have time to react. After their flying swords were destroyed, they were also cut into two at the waist. With one slash, 1/3 of the Limitless Sword sect disciples were killed. Several nearby mountains were also cleaved into two halves by the sword beams unleashed by the immortal artifacts. Seeing this scene, the Limitless Sword sect disciples were shocked. Those who did not die were instantly frightened and retreated far away. Each of them looked at Zhao Jiqing with a horrified expression. At this time, Zhao Jiqing's face did not look good. Although the sword earlier was incomparably sharp, it consumed a lot of energy to activate the immortal equipment. That slash had consumed at least 60% of her energy. Therefore, Zhao Jiqing was quickly refining the energy recovery pill to replenish the energy she had expended. Once her energy was depleted, not to mention using the immortal equipment to kill the enemy, even the 8 trigrams immortal robe would not be able to maintain its protection. In other words, once her energy was depleted, they would most likely die here today. What do we do? Huawei and the rest were not stupid. How could they not see that this was an extremely dangerous situation? On the other side, the Limitless Sword sect disciples naturally saw it too. Although the flying sword in her hand is powerful, but every time it is activated, it consumes a lot of energy. Be careful, don't get too close. Once her energy is depleted, they will definitely die. The leading youth said with a gloomy face. The other disciples of the Limitless Sword sect looked at Zhao Jiqing's side with murderous intent. They began to attack Zhao Jiqing and the rest from a distance. Because of the 8 trigrams immortal robe, these people's attacks were temporarily unable to harm Zhao Jiqing. However, every attack consumed a lot of Zhao Jiqing's energy. At this moment, she could only rely on continuously swallowing energy recovery pills to replenish her energy. She did not even have the chance to use her sword. Increase the attack. She can't hold on much longer. The leading youth shouted excitedly. At this moment, he was extremely excited. Yes, he was excited. Zhao Jiqing had at least 2 high-grade immortal equipment on her body. As long as they could kill her, not only would they be able to obtain the sect's rewards, they would also be able to obtain Zhao Jiqing's treasures. Let's leave this place. Zhao Jiqing looked around, then slowly retreated towards the entrance of the extreme heaven realm with Huawei and the rest. As long as they met the disciples of other sects, the Limitless Sword sect disciples would not dare to continue attacking. Once they met the other disciples of the Hidden Fairy Valley, they would come over to help. However, how could the Limitless Sword sect disciples not see through Zhao Jiqing's plan? With an order, the attacks of these people became even more powerful. Under their attacks, Zhao Jiqing and the rest walked further and further away from the entrance of the extreme heaven realm. After a long time, they were still unable to break through the protection of the 8 trigrams immortal robe. This was because Zhao Jiqing's energy recovery pills seemed to be endless. They could not eat them at all. Damn it! The leading youth of the Limitless Sword sect was furious. He roared and released a few horned dragon shadows, fiercely attacking Zhao Jiqing, an out-of-body stage cultivator. When they saw the horned dragon's shadow hovering above the young man's head, the hearts of Zhao Jiqing's people instantly sank. Zhao Jiqing's face became even uglier. Boom! Under the full attack of the youth, the white light emitted by the 8 trigram's immortal robe shook violently. On the other hand, Zhao Jiqing's heart trembled. Her qi and blood immediately surged up like a raging river. At this moment, Zhao Jiqing was shocked to find that just one attack from a youth had consumed 20% of her true core force. If the youth continued to attack, even if she had a large amount of energy recovery pills, she would not be able to replenish it. Could it be that we really can't protect them today? Zhao Jiqing looked to Huawei and the rest. She had an immortal equipment. Leaving alone would not be a problem. However, she could not abandon Huawei and the rest. She did not want to leave anyone behind. What should we do? Zhao Jiqing was anxious. In Murong, he has also entered the extreme heaven realm. At this moment, Zhao Jiqing suddenly thought of Murong Yu. Thus, without any hesitation, she took out a jade letter from her storage bag and crushed it. In the distance, Murong Yu and Zhang Ao were slowly flying towards the depths of the extreme heaven realm. Suddenly, Murong Yu frowned. In the next moment, his face changed. Zhang Ao, follow me. Murong Yu, whose face changed, kicked the flying sword under his feet. Then he grabbed Zhang Ao, who was beside him, who did not know what was going on. Then he soared into the sky and quickly flew in another direction. Chapter 139. Murong Yu stepped on the army word formula. His body was like a shooting star and seemed to be faster than lightning. It was like the teleportation of a tribulation stage cultivator. With a swoosh, he disappeared with Zhang Ao. When he reappeared, he was already tens of miles away. After a few leaps, he was already thousands of miles away. At this moment, Zhang Ao, for the first time, felt Murong Yu's terrifying speed. At this moment, Murong Yu had already used the army word formula to the extreme, flying in the void. His speed was so fast that it was only a few times faster than when he was practicing with Yu Mengqing and Hichu Luoshu. Sensing the boundless killing intent and fury coming from Murong Yu, Zhang Ao opened his mouth, wanting to ask what was going on. But in the end, he kept his mouth shut. Although he did not know why Murong Yu suddenly had such a reaction, although he really wanted to know the reason. But, as a subordinate, he still had the consciousness of a subordinate. Seeing how anxious Murong Yu was, he did not want to disturb Murong Yu. Otherwise, if he angered Murong Yu, he would be the unlucky one. Under Murong Yu's full speed, he quickly crossed a few thousand miles and appeared in the mountains. At this moment, looking around, he saw a group of people being surrounded and killed by another group of people. When Murong Yu saw the corpses of the girls who were on the verge of collapse, the fury in his heart completely erupted. Boundless killing intent soared into the sky, and he immediately let out a furious roar. In front was Zhao Jiqing and the rest. When Zhao Jiqing crushed the jade letter that Murong Yu left for her, Murong Yu knew that Zhao Jiqing was in trouble. Therefore, he rushed over at the first moment. Under the attack of the Limitless Sword Sect, especially the out-of-body stage cultivator of the Limitless Sword Sect, the protective light of the 8 trigram's immortal robe had shrunk by a lot. It only covered a few meters around Zhao Jiqing, protecting everyone. At this moment, Zhao Jiqing no longer swallowed the energy recovery pill, but directly burned it. But, even so, it could not support her speed of consumption. At this moment, Zhao Jiqing's face was frighteningly pale. She knew that if Murong Yu did not come, they would not be able to escape today. But, no matter what, she had to persevere. The people around her were all part of the Green Shin Peak. If she left the extreme heaven realm alone, who would dare to join the Green Shin Peak in the future? Moreover, she did not want anything to happen to Hua and the rest. However, the attacks from the Limitless Sword Sect were too powerful, and she could not hold on for much longer. At this moment, Huawei and the rest were in despair. "Senior sister, you don't have to care about us. You can escape by yourself," Huawei said again. They did not know how many times they had said this, but Zhao Jiqing did not abandon them. Zhao Jiqing shook her head firmly. "I'll say it again. Today, I can't let any of you stay. Either you leave together, or you stay together." After saying that, Zhao Jiqing's face revealed a trace of apology, and said, "In the end, it's all because of me. We are all from the Green Xian Peak. Senior sister's matter is our matter. They want to kill you, which means they want to kill us. This is not something we will allow." Another disciple gritted his teeth and said, he looked at the Limitless Sword Sect's disciples with eyes full of anger. "We will advance and retreat together." The Green Xian Peak's disciples were united. Zhao Jiqing was touched, but at the same time, she felt satisfied. These people were her people. They were absolutely loyal to her. Even in the face of life and death, they did not have any complaints. However, their performance made Zhao Jiqing even more determined to protect them. "Hold on. I've already asked for help. I believe that soon, someone will come to save us." Hearing that, the girls were overjoyed. At this moment, before Zhao Jiqing's voice fell, a furious roar came from afar. "You bastards, you dare to touch my woman? You're courting death." His voice was like rolling thunder, causing the sky and earth to change color and the earth to tremble. The loud and clear voice was filled with intense anger and murderous intent. Chi! Just as that voice was heard, everyone heard an extremely sharp sound that almost pierced their eardrums. Everyone looked towards the direction of the sound, only to see a long and huge crack in the sky. A ray of golden light was breaking through the sky at an extremely terrifying speed. It shot through the sky and shot toward them. Boom! The aura was as terrifying as the sea, and the killing intent was incomparably terrifying. A ray of golden light. Everyone only heard a ray of golden light cutting through the sky and shooting towards them. They could not see clearly what was inside the golden light. With a swoosh, the golden light tore through the sky above their heads and swept past them. At this moment, in the Limitless Sword Sect, the out-of-body stage cultivator suddenly let out a mournful scream. Then, before the screams died down, the crowd heard another loud bang. Bang! Everyone only saw the ray of golden light piercing through the out-of-body stage cultivator's body. Then, the out-of-body stage cultivator exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Dead? Seeing this scene, regardless of whether it was Zhao Jiqing's side or the Limitless Sword Sect side, they could not help but be shocked. At this moment, after killing the out-of-body stage cultivator, the ray of golden light continued to turn into a ray of golden light and flew back in the direction it came from. When the golden light left, its speed slowed down for a moment. It was at this moment that everyone saw the original appearance of the golden light, a divine arrow. Everyone exclaimed in surprise. "You bastards! How dare you touch my woman? All of you will die today." Just as the divine arrow flew back, a figure flew over from afar at an extremely terrifying speed. In the void, he grabbed the divine arrow that killed the out-of-body stage cultivator and took it away. It's him. At this moment, when Huawei and the others saw the appearance of the person who came, they could not help but exclaim. It was the fusion stage cultivator from the Mystic Moon sect who came to look for Zhao Jiqing before the extreme heavenly realm opened. He had a faint fragrance on his body. Why is he here? Who is his woman? Who is he? Isn't he only in the fusion stage? He can actually fly in the air with his physical body. His speed is really terrifying. For a moment, countless doubts appeared in the hearts of the girls. At this moment, Zhao Jiqing breathed a sigh of relief. He's finally here. Murong Yu's speed was very fast. He quickly swept over the girls and rushed to the front of the Limitless Sword Sect disciples. Myriad Sword Secret Art. With a roar, Murong Yu instantly displayed the Myriad Sword Secret Art. In an instant, hundreds of spirit-grade flying swords appeared out of thin air. Then, they flashed with an astonishing killing intent and burst out sword rays that soared into the sky. Hundreds of millions of sword rays soared into the sky, as if covering the heaven and earth, covering the sun and moon. Kill! Murong Yu roared, and hundreds of millions of sword rays came down. Above Murong Yu's head, there were 100 incomparably condensed black dragon shadows. Under his control, the power of the 100 dragons was all injected into the flying swords under his control. The power of the 100 dragons was far beyond the strength of the limitless sword sect disciples present. Even the cultivators of the spirit tranquil stage were far inferior to Murong Yu. Moreover, the flying swords that Murong Yu controlled this time were all spirit grade. Therefore, when the hundreds of millions of sword rays came down, even the sword cultivators of the limitless sword sect were unable to resist. In the first moment, more than half of the disciples were directly twisted into pieces. Only waves of mournful screams and bursts of bloody mist were left. Some of the stronger ones were still able to resist Murong Yu's attack. However, how could Murong Yu let them go? All of you must die. Murong Yu roared and controlled the 100 flying swords to shatter the heaven and earth. Only waves of mournful screams could be heard. The sword cultivators of the limitless sword sect did not even have the chance to escape and were all killed. In fact, only the out-of-body stage cultivators present were a threat to Murong Yu. However, Murong Yu was smart. From afar, he used the Chinquin bow to shoot him dead. Then, the group of out-of-body stage cultivators were simply massacred, who asked Murong Yu's strength to far surpass them. Moreover, this guy controlled 100 spirit-grade flying swords. Even out-of-body stage cultivators would be crushed into powder, let alone them. The battle ended very quickly. While Huawei and the others were still in a state of shock, Murong Yu had already cleaned up the dozens of cultivators from the limitless sword faction. After killing these people, Murong Yu turned and walked towards Zhao Jiqing, seeing Murong Yu walking over with a murderous aura. In fact, why would Murong Yu have killing intent toward Zhao Jiqing? It was just that after experiencing a massacre, the killing intent on his body had not completely faded away. Huawei's heart trembled. Her figure flashed and blocked in front of Zhao Jiqing. Her eyes were filled with fear, but she looked at Murong Yu with determination. Her voice trembled as she said, "Who are you? Don't come over." Murong Yu was startled. Then, he could not help but feel a burst of laughter. He suddenly stared at Huawei with a murderous aura and said, "Girl, get out of my way. Do you believe that I won't strip you naked and spank your butt?" Huawei's face revealed a look of shame and anger. Although she was afraid, she did not move. Murong Yu strode forward and slowly stretched out his hand. She watched as Murong Yu stretched out his large hand and slowly grabbed her. Thinking of Murong Yu's terrifying strength, Huawei's heart was scared to death. But even so, she still stood in front of Zhao Jiqing with her head held high. She stared fiercely at Murong Yu, not retreating at all. Murong Yu's hand stretched out. Then, with lightning speed, he directly pinched Huawei's delicate little face. Then, he gently pinched and said, "Girl, I wanted to pinch your face for a long time. Ever since I came up the mountain, you've been going against me. Today, I'll let you know the consequences of going against me." What's going on? At this moment, other than Zhao Jiqing, everyone was puzzled. Huawei was furious. She stared fiercely at Murong Yu. She wanted to pounce on him and bite him to death. Chapter 140. Murong Yu pinched Huawei's face again and finally retracted his hand and said with a smile, "Girl, it feels good." Huawei was stunned and even had the heart to die. "Evil thief, I'll kill you." Huawei was furious and took out her flying sword and slashed down at Murong Yu. Murong Yu's figure flashed and instantly dodged her attack. Huawei was about to continue her attack, but Zhao Jiqing stepped forward and stopped her. "Okay, don't make trouble. Murong, don't tease her." Zhao Jiqing looked at Murong Yu and said with a dumbfounded expression. Murong Yu shrugged, and his right hand brushed past his face, and then a familiar face appeared in front of the women. Murong Yu. It was only when they saw Murong Yu that the girls finally reacted. It turned out that he was Murong Yu, but he was wearing a mask. And this also explained why Zhao Jiqing, who was usually like an iceberg, would let him get close to her. It also explained Murong Yu's roar, "My woman." The doubts in the hearts of the women were all eliminated in an instant. However, at this time, Huawei was still looking at Murongyu with a face full of shame and anger. This guy actually bullied her again. Whenever she thought about how Murongyu had bullied her again, Huawei's teeth itched with hatred. However, she also knew that she wasn't Murongyu's match, so she couldn't be bothered to retaliate. Instead, she glared fiercely at Murongyu, as if this was the only way she could get her revenge. Leader. At this time, Zhang Ao flew over from a distance. Murongyu nodded, then glanced around and left with the people. In this process, he understood why the Limitless Sword sect wanted to kill Zhao Jiqing and the other girls. It seems that not only the Limitless Sword sect will make a move on you, the other sects will also make a move on you. After pondering for a while, Murongyu said with a murderous aura, the other 9 sects, and even people outside of the top 10 sects, could make a move on Zhao Jiqing. After all, killing Zhao Jiqing would not only deal a blow to the hidden fairy valley, but it would also give him a lot of benefits. Who wouldn't want to make a move? The key point was that Zhao Jiqing's strength was too low. She was only at the fusion stage. Among those who had entered the extreme heavenly realm, there were many who were at a higher realm than the fusion stage. Heartbeat stage, silent spirit stage, and even out-of-body stage. The girls were worried, and some even suggested that they should just leave the extreme celestial realm. Although it was a little embarrassing to leave right after entering, it was better than losing his life. Go out? Why did he have to go out? There is everything in the extreme celestial realm. It only opens once every 10 years. If you go out now, you might not have the chance to come back in the future. Murongyu said with a sneer. Out-of-body realm cultivators could enter after sealing their cultivation. However, with Murongyu and Zhao Jiqing's cultivation speed, who could say for sure what realm they'd reach in 10 years? Once they surpassed the out-of-body stage, they would never be able to enter the extreme celestial realm. Therefore, Murongyu planned to get all the things he wanted in one go. Are they from the other sects? Someone asked worriedly. So what? Whoever dares to make a move, I will just kill them. At most, I will kill them all. Murongyu said with a murderous aura. With his ability, whoever dared to make a move on them would be courting death. Of course, if Murongyu really wanted to kill them all, it was not impossible. Of course, Murongyu would not be so bored as to chase after them. His main purpose in entering the extreme celestial realm was to find the spirit vein. Therefore, he led the girls and flew into the depths of the extreme celestial realm. Although the extreme celestial realm was known to have countless precious spiritual herbs and spiritual herbs. However, it opened once every 10 years. In the outermost areas, even if there were any precious treasures, they would have long been collected. Therefore, if they wanted to get more treasures, they could only choose to go deeper. However, the deeper they went, the more dangerous it was. However, this did not stop everyone's enthusiasm for treasure hunting. Therefore, other than Murongyu's group, many people walked into the depths of the extreme celestial realm. During this process, there were battles everywhere in the extreme celestial realm. Various sects were killing each other. Perhaps it was because a certain sect had obtained a spiritual herb or spiritual herb of a rather old age. After the news spread, it attracted others to snatch and kill. Perhaps some sects entered the extreme celestial realm to fight and snatch the treasures on others. Along the way, Murongyu and the others saw severed limbs and corpses strewn all over the ground. Countless people died in the battle. Bloody. Perhaps it was because they had never seen such a bloody and cruel side. Huawei and the others did not look too good. Even Zhao Jiqing frowned slightly. As for Murongyu and Zhang Ao, these two guys were ruthless people. When they saw the corpses, it was as if they had never seen them before. Their emotions did not change at all. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Murongyu and the others had just entered a call when suddenly figures appeared on the surrounding mountains. Disciples of the hidden fairy valley. TSK, TSK. You must have a lot of treasures on you. One of the middle-aged men looked at Murongyu and the others who were surrounded, licked his lips, and said with a ferocious expression. Murong glanced at these people indifferently and realized that they were all dressed differently. They were all small characters who had been pieced together by some miscellaneous small sections. Seeing these people appear, the others were not nervous. However, Murong soon realized that something was amiss. Thus, aside from him, everyone's attention was focused on him. What's the situation? Murong looked at everyone with a bitter face. The girls covered their mouths and snickered. You're the strongest one here. Of course, you'll be the one to deal with them. We're all delicate girls. Don't you feel embarrassed to ask us to do it? Moreover, we're too weak. We'll just die if we go. Capable people do more work. Even Zhao Jiqing covered her mouth and looked at Murong with a smile. Her meaning was obvious. Murong looked up and sighed. I met the wrong people. In the end, he walked out slowly and reluctantly. There was no other way. They were not strong enough and were not a match for those people. They would die if they went out. As such, Murong was the only one who could take action. However, at this time, Murong really felt very bitter. This kind of situation where there were no capable people under him was really too bitter. He swore that he would have some masters come out in the shortest time possible. In this case, there was no need for him to do it himself. As a leader, as a boss, how could he personally take action against a small fry like this? Hand over your flying swords and elixirs. The middle-aged man stood on the top of the mountain and looked at the people below and shouted angrily. Murong walked out with a bitter face. Hearing this, he seemed to be very cooperative and grabbed a few flying swords in succession. 1 sword, 2 swords, 3 swords. Murong's big hands kept grabbing in the air. Every time, a flying sword was taken out by him. In just a few breaths, Murong was holding a lot of flying swords of high grade in his hands. Seeing this scene, the middle-aged man and his group all showed a look of ecstasy. This guy had a lot of inventory on him. It seemed that he should be the descendant of some big shot. As long as he was killed. Boy, throw your storage bag over. The middle-aged man pointed at Murong and shouted. Murong sneered. You'd better catch my flying swords first. While speaking, Murong had already thrown out the flying swords in his hand like a fairy scattering flowers. Chi-chi. In an instant, hundreds of millions of sword lights rushed into the sky, followed by a burst of shrill screams. Under the attack of Murong's myriad sword art, these small characters whose cultivation was only at the heartbeat stage did not even have time to react. They were all twisted into pieces of minced meat. After a few breaths, the screams gradually stopped. Originally, there were dozens of people, but now there was not a single intact person. No, it should be said that there was not a single intact corpse. Murong clapped his hands, done. Then he turned around and walked back. Whoosh! At this moment, a figure rushed out from the crowd and then plunged into the pile of minced meat, constantly churning. Looking at Zhang Ao, who was collecting the wealth of the dead, Murong shook his head and said helplessly, "This child is so poor that he's crazy." Hearing this, the faces of the girls showed a look of disdain. I don't know who told him to collect the things of the dead. Murong's face immediately changed and said, "You prodigal girls, you don't know how expensive oil and salt are if you don't take charge of the family. I'm diligent and thrifty. I won't leave anything behind." Everyone rolled their eyes. In fact, after killing the people of the Limitless Sword Sect, Murong ordered Zhang Ao to collect the flying swords and storage bags of the disciples. Along the way, whenever he saw a lot of corpses, Zhang Ao would go up and plunder them. So now, after Murong killed these people, he did not even need Murong's order and immediately jumped out. This made Murong sigh. This child has a future. He can infer many things from one example. He has a future. As for Huawei and the others, he shook his head. There's no future for them. In fact, Murong even made a decision. In the future, he must accept a child like Zhang Ao with a future. It would save him a lot of trouble and money. He had a future. Murong and the others walked towards the depths of the extreme heaven realm. In the process, whenever they encountered other sect's disciples, Murong would take care of them. Zhang Ao, on the other hand, made a fortune from the dead, which made him very happy. Under Murong Yu's strength, anyone who came to find trouble was directly dealt with by him. Moreover, other than the people of the Limitless Sword sect, there were no other cultivators from the 10 great sections. Rumble. On this day, Murong Yu and the others had just climbed over a mountain when they heard a thunderous sound coming from the front. The loud sound was earth-shattering. Even the ground was trembling. It was obvious that there were people fighting in front. Murong Yu and the others stood on top of the mountain and looked over. In front of them, there were hundreds of people fighting. These terrifying loud noises were caused by the collision of these people's powers during the battle. Looking carefully, they found that the people fighting were actually cultivators from the 10 great sects. Limitless Sword sect, Zhushenzong, Yuan Su sect, and even Sky Yin sect. For the 10 great sects, all of them had grudges with Murong Yu. And at this time, they were obviously divided into 2 factions and were fighting in pairs. Other than them, there were also cultivators from other sects mixed in with them, crazily killing each other. Every moment, someone would be killed. Chapter 141. The sound of killing filled the void, and the ground was filled with broken limbs. It was like a battlefield, but it was even more terrifying than a battlefield. It was extremely tragic. Obviously, these sects should be small sects under the major sections. In addition to the people fighting in the open space on the nearby mountains, there were many sects watching the battle like Murong Yu's group. There were at least thousands of people. Murong Yu looked over and saw that there were at least 100 different forces scattered around the area. Perhaps they knew the cruelty of the extreme heaven realm. After the first few days of killing, many sects had already united and formed an alliance. The strength of a single sect was too weak, and only an alliance could survive here. Looking at the huge battle in front, Zhao Jiqing and the others were shocked. And the people on the nearby mountains were obviously not just here to watch the show. Although they did not know why Zhushenzong and the other big sect were fighting, it was definitely not without reason. Perhaps they had obtained some treasure, and because of that, a big battle broke out. The people watching the battle, as long as the time was right, would probably kill. Let's leave this place. Zhao Jiqing did not want to get involved in this matter. Once they got involved, they would not be enough to be killed. If it was any other time, Murong Yu would not say anything and just turn around and leave. But now he shook his head. It's so lively. How can I, Murong Yu, be left out? Although Murong Yu had a smile on his face, his eyes flashed with a dangerous light as he looked at the people tearing apart in the distance. Limitless Sword sect, Zhushenzong, Yuan Su sect. Among the 3 sects, the Limitless Sword sect actually dared to kill Murong Yu. At that time, Murong Yu had already decided that within the extreme heaven realm, he would kill anyone from the Limitless Sword sect that he saw. Needless to say, Zhushenzong and Yuan Su sect's disciples. These 2 sects had not given up on pursuing Murong Yu. So naturally, Murong Yu would not let them go. It's fine if the people from the 3 great sects don't meet me. But if they do, all of them will die. Murong Yu narrowed his eyes as killing intent flashed in his heart. Since he had already decided to make a move, Murong Yu naturally would not leave. However, the safety of Zhao Jiqing and the others made him hesitate. Once he got involved in this battle, Zhao Jiqing and the others would definitely not be spared. Zhao Jiqing was still all right. She had the immortal weapon that he had given her, so she should have no problem protecting herself. However, Huawei and Zhang Ao were unlikely to survive. What should we do? Murong Yu muttered to himself. The only way to protect Huawei and the others was to send them into the Hichu Luoshu world. However, if he did that, he was afraid that the secret of the Hichu Luoshu would be exposed. Although it was impossible for them to know that it was the Hichu Luoshu world, they knew that Murong Yu had such a treasure that could store people. Boom! Just as Murong Yu was hesitating, a terrifying aura suddenly erupted from the chaotic battle in front of him. Then a terrifying sword light soared into the sky, carrying with it a terrifying sword intent. Puff! The terrifying sword intent was like a tidal wave, instantly sweeping in all directions. Immediately, countless disciples from the four great sects and their affiliated sects in the center of the battle were crushed into pieces by the terrifying sword intent. What a terrifying sword intent! When he saw the sword light that contained the terrifying sword intent, Murong Yu's face suddenly revealed a look of surprise. Immortal weapon! Only an immortal weapon could have such a terrifying sword intent. Almost immediately, Murong Yu was sure that the sword was an immortal weapon. Other than Murong Yu, the surrounding onlookers also guessed the grade of the sword. However, they could not be sure that the sword was an immortal weapon. However, even if they could not be sure of the grade, they still thought that it was a spiritual weapon of a high grade. A spiritual weapon of a high grade usually referred to a spiritual weapon of the 7th grade or above. When they thought that it was a spiritual weapon of the 7th grade or above, the greed in their hearts suddenly expanded infinitely. Murong Yu narrowed his eyes slightly, looking at the person in the distance who was holding an immortal weapon and sweeping in all directions. It was an immortal weapon. When he realized that it was an immortal weapon, he had the idea of snatching it. If this immortal weapon was in the hands of the Hidden Fairy Valley or the Xianyue sect's disciples, he might not have such thoughts. However, he would definitely not allow this immortal weapon to fall into the hands of the four great sects like the Zhushenzong sect. At this moment, Murong Yu also knew why these people were fighting. An immortal weapon, not to mention these extreme heavenly realm cultivators, even the cultivation world outside. It was enough to cause the entire cultivation world to go crazy. Even the 10 great sects would fight over an immortal weapon, let alone these people. These people could not take the immortal weapon for themselves, but if they offered it to the sect, their status in the sect would definitely skyrocket. Therefore, these people went crazy. Aha! This immortal weapon is destined to be mine, Zhushenzong's. None of you can lay a finger on it. The person holding the immortal weapon was actually Zhushenzong's disciple. At this moment, with the immortal weapon in hand, his strength had skyrocketed, and so had his confidence. This was because he was originally in the out-of-body stage. Now that he had the immortal weapon in hand, even if he did not activate the immortal weapon's power, he could still dominate the extreme heaven realm with the immortal weapon's power alone. Kill! This person roared angrily and rushed into the crowd of Celestial Expanse sect disciples. Then, he raised his sword and directly chopped off the head of an out-of-body stage cultivator from Celestial Expanse sect. Ha ha ha! Feeling that he was invincible among his peers, Zhushenzong's disciple laughed loudly. Immortal weapon. While Zhushenzong's disciple was laughing, the surrounding onlookers finally moved. One by one, they soared into the sky and charged toward the immortal weapon, wanting to snatch it. They could not wait any longer. This was because the people near Murong Yu had already started fighting. Even if Murong Yu and the others wanted to retreat now, they would not be able to get away. Therefore, with a thought from Murong Yu, Zhao Jiqing and the others felt the scenery in front of them flash, and then they appeared in an unfamiliar space. Don't worry, this is one of my treasures. Just stay here. As he spoke, Murong had already soared into the sky. In the void, he had already reverted to his original appearance. He stepped on a flying sword and carried the phoenix spear on his back as he charged toward the immortal weapon. Boom! 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 With the immortal weapon in hand, Zhushenzong's out-of-body stage cultivator was extremely arrogant. He really felt that, with a sword in hand, he could conquer the world. In fact, with the immortal weapon in hand, he really killed the people around him. Even though there were more than a dozen out-of-body stage cultivators around him, they could not get close to him. Of course, because he did not have the power to destroy the immortal weapon, the people around him could barely resist his attack. Otherwise, these people would not be enough for him to kill. Murong Yu stood in the air and sneered at Zhushenzong's disciple. Idiot! You think you could be invincible with the immortal weapon? You're courting death. Zhushenzong's disciple was enraged when he heard this. Without even looking, he directly slashed at Murong Yu with his sword. Boom! A terrifying sword light soared into the sky, shattering the heaven and earth. It carried a shocking sword essence, and shattered everything in its path as it fiercely attacked Murongyu. The first to be hit was not Murongyu, but the cultivators from other sects between Murongyu and himself. These weak cultivators did not even have the chance to escape before they were crushed by the shocking sword essence. As for Murongyu, he had already used the army formula and dodged the opponent's attack with unparalleled speed. Murongyu. At this time, Zhushenzong's disciple with the immortal weapon looked at Murongyu and instantly recognized him. Die. After recognizing Murongyu, this person held the immortal weapon and charged toward him fiercely. Murongyu did not expect that the opponent could recognize him. However, he was not afraid. Using the troop formula, he unleashed the Great Vajra Chakra Seal and attacked the person who was approaching. Break for me. Seeing the Great Vajra Wheel Seal that was like a huge mountain crashing down, the person roared and held the immortal weapon tightly with both hands. Then he slashed out with his sword. Boom! After a shocking explosion, the Great Vajra Wheel Seal that Murongyu had hurriedly used was actually split in half by his sword. As expected of an immortal weapon, its power was amazing. Boom! Although the Great Vajra Wheel Seal was split in half by the immortal weapon, the remaining two halves were still as huge as a mountain. They fiercely bombarded the ground. After a shocking explosion, countless cultivators on the ground were instantly smashed into pieces. The terrifying power of the Great Vajra Wheel Seal was completely exposed. The powerful force shook the ground, and broken limbs were everywhere on the ground. With just this attack, hundreds of cultivators were directly killed. Murongyu died. Zhushenzong's disciple held the immortal weapon and roared with murderous intent. He chased after Murongyu again. Boom! 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 During this process, the power of countless cultivators around them covered the sky, shattered the void, shook the sky, and crazily strangled Zhushenzong's disciple who held the immortal weapon. At this moment, no one dared to attack Murongyu. Although Murongyu might have an immortal weapon, that was just speculation. It was far less practical than the immortal weapon in front of them. The immortal weapon in front of them was the most important thing, and that was why they were crazy. Qin Hui held the immortal weapon with both hands and slashed it horizontally, shattering all the power that was coming toward him halfway. However, there were too many people around him. Even if he slashed with all his strength, he was still a little overwhelmed. In the end, he gave up chasing after Murongyu and started killing again. However, the surrounding cultivators had learned their lesson and just kept attacking Qin Hui from afar. Once Qin Hui's attack came, they would immediately retreat. Only the strongest out-of-body stage cultivators were fighting with Qin Hui. Seeing your brother Qin, take the immortal weapon and leave the extreme heaven realm quickly. We will stop them. Zhushenzong's disciples were all in a killing frenzy and fought with the disciples of the other sections. However, it was obvious that although they had a lot of people, they were far inferior to the cultivators of the other sections. Looking at the gradually decreasing number of his fellow disciples, Qin Hui's eyes suddenly turned red and murderous intent burst out. It was not because of the lives of these people, but because as Zhushenzong's disciples decreased, the pressure on him increased. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.